Итак, добрый день.
Good afternoon. Today our briefing is taking place in special conditions, special circumstances, and special place, in a place connected to the most difficult, most protracted battles in the Great Patriotic War. Ever since our school years, we remember the lines of Alexander Tverdovsky. I was killed near Rzhev in a nameless swamp in the 5th Regiment during a terrific onslaught. So we are here in Rzhev. These battle around the ancient Russian city lasted for many days. There have been 4 strategic offensive operations conducted by the Soviet forces against the German Center Army Group Center Group. They tried to liberate the cities of Rzhev, Sychevka, and Vyazma, thereby eliminating the Rzhev-Vyazma salient. The German command called Rzhev the cornerstone of the Eastern Front and deployed one of the largest grouping of forces there, numbering over 1.5 million men. These forces were tied down for a long time by fighting and were unable to be redeployed to the other key sectors of the front, to the Caucasus and Stalingrad. Offensive operations in the Rzhev direction played a crucial role in achieving a decisive breakthrough in favor of the Red Army along the entire Soviet-German front. In number 1942, 1943, and the Rzhev Memorial, where we are currently standing, is one of the main monuments in Russian Federation dedicated to that era. There is a main sculptural focal point, a 25 meters tall figure of a warrior, seemingly dissolving in a flock of cranes, symbolizing the souls of fallen soldiers, gone but not forgotten. I would like to remind everyone that the ceremonial opening of this memorial, created on the initiative of the Second World War veterans in the Russian Military Historical Society, took place on June 30th, 2020, with the participation of the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Since 2019, the All-Russian Public Organization, Young Guard of United Russia, and the All-Russian Youth Patriotic Organization, called the Volunteer Company of Combat Brotherhood, have been holding educational events at the Fyodor Okhlopkov Military Patriotic Camp. Today here we see the start of the work of the All-Russian Youth Forum called Gvardeysk. This year, more than 1,500 young people aged 18 to 35 from 89 regions of the Russian Federation, including students, young workers, community activists, young leaders, and of course the participants of this special military operation and the representative of the fraternal people of Belarus. We see all of them among the participants. The central topic of this forum is shaping the image of the future for the eyes of young people. Participants will present proposals to be included in the program of the United Russia Party People's Program, collected from young people in the regions, initiatives voiced during the DRR results reporting and program forums. Participants will enjoy a comprehensive educational program including historical reenactments, research activities in the sports program. Federal experts, incumbent politicians and political strategists, media managers and heads of leading Russian companies will serve as lecturers and mentors. One more symbolic moment that I should mention, and I'm not talking about purely symbolic nature, but something more, something that ensures a connection between generations and makes us spiritual heirs of our fathers and grandfathers who saved the world from Nazism, the very spiritual values upon which hinges our country, our civilization, and the continuity of our Russian history. This year, like last year, 16 young men, members of the Young Guard of United Russia and the Volunteer Company, will volunteer for active duty from this very spot where more than 80 years ago the great victory was forged in bloody battles at the cost of enormous sacrifice. They will be volunteering to join the army, and from this day on they will fight against neo-Nazis and those who have forgotten their history, their ancestors, their language, that have betrayed what their fathers and grandfathers fought for, who are betraying and erasing their own language. And they are fighting against all those who have made heroes and idols out of Hitler's henchmen and collaborators, who have created a sanctuary for them to worship those people. Our heroes will go on to defend the world from, protect the world from this resurgent misanthropic ideology of those who shell schools, hospitals, and apartment buildings, who commit terrorist attacks against civilians and murder defenseless children, and murdering everyone in their sights. And I would like to give some comments to those young people, and of course there will be a separate meeting with them later. The thing I wanted to tell them using this podium as a platform, what I wanted to say to those people, these young people who have taken upon themselves this very important decision which will shape their life further on. This challenge that they upheld, they have proven with actions, not just words, that they are deserving of the memory of their heroic ancestors who fought there near Rzhev to defend and protect the freedom and independence of our homeland against a powerful and treacherous enemy who have protected our independence. It's just terrific to imagine, just try to do it. What would happen to Europe, its western part, if not for our grandfathers and great-grandfathers who eradicated Nazism and fascism, and through liberating them, giving them life and true liberty and freedom, now we see how they disposed of that freedom. And we are trying to, and we're seeing that Western Europe now is doing its utmost to turn itself into a neo-Nazi militaristic monstrosity. Why neo-Nazi? Why? When they are separating people according to a national principle of nationality, religion, when people are forbidden to speak their own language that they were educated with by their fathers and mothers, when they are prohibited from reading the literature in their mother tongue and are prohibited of studying according to the books that have been issued by their ancestors, when they are prohibited from honoring their ancestors, their heroes of their countries and their people. This is the Nazism that we're talking about. And now we see that Western Europe is returning to neo-Nazism. It's not even raising its head again. It's just it's been actively uprooted by the authorities in those countries. I know that the boys that I mentioned, that I will be talking to later today, they are joining the army not for medals, not for glory. They are setting out for something greater than themselves, something stronger than themselves, something more powerful than themselves, for the sake of freedom, not a pseudo-freedom as presented in the Western democracies, but rather veritable freedom when you are free to think and to feel, to find something new, to receive education, to use it, for the sake of peace, for the sake of life on earth, not just mere existence, not biological reproduction, but life with honor, dignity, and conscience. And we wish them all to come back alive and unharmed and come back with victory. And as always, when we are in some region with an outbriefing, we are telling everyone about its history and its foreign and external relations. This is a dynamically developing region of the Russian Federation with a high-tech economy. It is constructing its external relations with a focus on closer cooperation with friendly countries. The region is successfully cooperating with 92 countries worldwide. Its priority partners are the CIS countries, the countries of the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. The region's main exports go to Belarus, 38.6%, China, 16.8%, and Kazakhstan, 11.3%. The predominant exports include mechanical engineering products, food products and raw materials, timber and pulp, as well as paper products, metals and metal products, mineral products, and chemicals. The Tver region imports the most goods from China, namely 43.1%, and Belarus 25.6%. Trade volume in 2025 increased by 10.8% compared to 2024. The Tver region is quite a picturesque land, full, and now once again, when I'm coming here, although I'm coming here quite often, I had the chance to see it for myself. This land is full of mysteries and amazing stories. Its unique geographical location between two capitals and diverse landscapes, rich history and culture make it a true gem for all travel enthusiasts. The region is leader in our country when it comes to the tourism development. There are around 11,000 historical and cultural monuments in the region that are protected by the state, and tourist flow has increased by a factor of 2.3 since 2017. The main attractions in the region are, of course, the resort areas, namely Zavidovo, Kanakovo, Seliger, Peno, Toropets, Kalязин, Kimry, and Vysegonsk, as well as the towns and cities with rich history, namely Tver, Staritsa, Torzhok, Rzhev, Vyshny Volochysk, Bezhetsk, and Kashin. Tver region is also hosting two national interregional tourist routes, the Tsar's Road and At the Command of the Soul, which lead to the source of the great Russian river, the Volga. Furthermore, one of the oldest officially established tourist routes in our country, the beloved Pushkin Ring of the Upper Volga, created in 1971, passes to the region. Tver Oblast has something for everyone. Nature lovers can enjoy the beauty of forests, rivers, and lakes. For example, the Lake Seliger, one of the largest lakes in the region, which is attracting tourists with picturesque landscapes. Here you can enjoy active outdoors, recreation, and try your hand at water sports. And the Volga River, which flows its first 685 kilometers through the Tver region, and the Mologa and Medveditsa rivers will leave no one unsatisfied. The region boasts large protected natural areas such as the Zavidovo National Park, and the MFA employees should know well that there are some lands managed by the Glava Perikei of the Russian MFA. And also we see here the Central Forest State Nature Biosphere Reserve, which makes the region particularly attractive to ecotourists. In 2026, 3 cities of the Upper Volga region, Tver, Kalязин, and Kashin, were included in the updated Golden Ring tourist route. The Tver region's cultural and historical heritage is striking in its diversity. You can see monasteries, churches, and estates dating back to various historical periods. For example, the Nilova Pustin monastery that I visited myself a couple of years ago. It's a fantastic place, fantastic temple, church, and I was there in winter, but I wanted to return there in summer to see it not only covered by snow, but also in the summer period. And there is a very interesting museum there. And also I'd like to especially mention the Novotorsky Monastery. Who hasn't visited it yet should do so immediately. Also, a separate mention goes to the Starisky Holy Mission Monastery, which gave birth to the first Russian patriarch. And of course, you would be wise to visit the ancient town of Torzhok, which is surrounded by a cluster of estates designed by the talented Russian architect Nikolai Lvov, a follower of the great Italian Renaissance architect Andrea Palladio. Those estates represents the pinnacle of his work. Also of particular importance are the memorial museums dedicated to prominent figures such as Alexander Pushkin, Mikhail Kalinin and Mikhail Saltykov-Shchedrin, and the hero of the Soviet Union, Lisa Chaikina. Two cities in the Tver region, Rzhev and Tver itself, bear the honorary title of the City of Military Glory. Since 2016, according to the executive order of the President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, there is an annual international military historical search exhibition, Rzhev Kalinin Front, going on there every year. Every year, approximately 500 enthusiasts from more than 50 Russian regions participate in this expedition, they include the representative of the All-Russian Public Movement for perpetuating the memory of those who died defending the fatherland, the aforementioned search movement of Russia, and other organizations are also involved in that search. In 2025, the Memory Watch near Rzhev reunited approximately 230 enthusiasts from 35 squads representing Belarus and various regions of Russia. Numerous festivals, concerts, exhibitions, and other types of events can be held in the Tver region. I will just name a few of them, and you will understand for yourself. It's impossible to say what's the most striking out of them. The momentum is only gathering. For example, you can visit the Karandash Fest. What do you think this is all about? What is this dedicated to? It is dedicated to the beloved clown Karandash. Just look at his life story. We will add it and attach it to the text of this briefing. This is something that is a part of our history and culture. Also, I'd like to mention the gastronomic festival called Kalitka, dedicated to the Karelian pie. The Karelians have lived in the Tver region for over 400 years. Also, I'd like to mention the Selige Fishmonger Festival and the Vereshchagin Cheese Fest and the Aerostan Zavidovo Sports Festival, Opera and Jazz and Zavidovo, and also a separate mention should go to concerts performed by Igor Butman, just to name just a few of the events. And the events are numerous and diverse in character. Of course, it would be important to mention the Pozharsky cutlets. It would be only fair for every visitor of the region to try them. You can use all adjectives usually used with the word tourism: cultural, educational, recreational, pilgrimage, active, and sports, nature, for children and family. Everything can be applied to activities in this region. But of course, this is all well, but we are frequently asked by foreign citizens that if we know so much about our country, what could the foreign visitors do to find out all the opportunities presented by the tourist cluster in the Tver region? Of course, there are a lot of opportunities for that, but without interactive assistance, without something being accessible through smartphones or different other devices, this would be of use. I'm talking about apps that could be convenient to use when planning a trip to Russia from abroad. That's why I wanted to mention a couple of words about the project called in English, because it's intended for foreigners, the Visit Russia project. It contains useful information for everyone who is planning their trip into Russia. Our country pays enormous attention to, as per tradition, to making trips for foreigners as comfortable as possible. And this has been developed with the participation of the different state agencies, for example, the Central Bank and the Agency of Strategic Initiatives, and some other commercial structures. What is the essence of this project? It is to create a digital platform based on AI technologies and a mobile app. We will supplement text briefing with the corresponding links that will be working on the principle of a single window principle to reunite all services required for a comfortable trip, and also to explain information with the e-visas and other rules of visiting of our countries, the use of a mobile network, payment services, etc., etc. Also, voice assistance is available based on AI technologies, which supports 36 languages.
The platform allows to book hotels and buy tickets and buy insurance, and gives guidelines as per planning of your tourist routes, and provides with the best whereabouts and recreation options. And this project has garnered a lot of interest among foreigners from Middle East, India and Turkey, and our friends from elsewhere. 200,000 tourists visit this web portal each day. So please get to know it and test it and utilize it on tour to make a wonderful journey. Now we move to the relevant international agenda, and I will start by mentioning a very grave topic. Today, on the 27th of July, I cannot actually select a verb. Well, we commemorate a tragic date. It is a day of remembrance for children who were victims of the brutal war unleashed by the fascist Kiev regime. And the commemorative date was established by the decree of the head of the People's Republic of Donetsk on the 11th of July 2022. On that day, in 2014, Ukrainian punitive forces launched a Grad missile attack on the downtown and center of Holovka, killing 22 civilians, including 4 children. Among them were 23-year-old Kristina Zhuk and her 10-month-old daughter, who later became known as the Holovka Madonna. Their names are immortalized on the Avenue of Angels in Donetsk. According to the investigative committee of the Russian Federation, from 2014 to 2026, over 240 children were killed by the Ukrainian armed forces. Another 1,225 were injured to varying degrees. The terrorist attack on the dormitory of a pedagogical college in Starobelsk on the 22nd of May killed 21 students, and I'd like to emphasize most of them were female students, and injured more than 40 others. On the 17th of June, a strike on a bus carrying children in the Bryansk region killed a pregnant woman accompanying them and injured 6 people, including 5 children. On the 20th of July, a drone struck a passenger bus in Shebekino, killing a 3-year-old child. What has the Kiev regime been telling about children and care for children? They allegedly scout for children, for those children. Actually, you know what? For normal people, for people who can be regarded as humans and as humane and as civilized, they do not regard children as alien. They do not distinguish children by ethnicity, nationality, creed, race. For normal people, there is the notion of child, and normal people will never ever see the suffering of children and trying to assist or display compassion. Will ask, who do you belong to? What is your ethnicity? What is your nationality? What is your mother tongue? What are your parents called? And what is your patronymic name? And what are the final letters of your surname? And which God you pray? And who do you believe in? A normal individual will first do everything and anything to help a kid and alleviate the suffering or prevent the suffering from happening. And those who believe and state that they are supportive of resolutions in support of maternity and childhood, and have been touting everybody that they've been looking for their children, but at the same time they horribly, atrociously kill children. They cannot be regarded as normal people, normal humans. And actually, secondly, they need to get those kids back, not to provide them with a happy childhood and life, but to justify for their bloody crimes and to deflect everyone's attention from their bloody crimes. And thirdly, to make them kids, any kids, fall another prey to their ideology. Either indirectly or actually literally. Indirectly means infecting them with their Nazi ideology, or literally which means mobilizing them in several years and throw them into the pot of war. The horrible statistics of the Kiev regime continue. They have been impacting kids. The West has been turning a blind eye, but this is a protruded card, and actually they've been supplying arms, giving new munitions and equipment and political support, and they've been justifying the barbaric acts and silencing and hushing up the terrorist attacks and whitewashing their neo-Nazi character of the perpetrators. But we forget nothing. We will continue to point out the war crimes committed by the Ukraine with the full support of the self-proclaimed so-called progressive, in inverted commas, so-called progressive part of the global community. And we will seek to ensure that everyone responsible for the pain, suffering and death of children receives the due punishment. This is no vengeance. This is no instinct. This is preserving what is called humanity on Earth. On the 27th of July at 10 a.m. Moscow time, a memorial service for the children of Donbass and other Russian regions whose lives were taken by the criminal Kiev regime was held at Donetsk People's Republic Square in Moscow. Participants laid flowers at a sign bearing the names of the deceased. A memorial service was held at the Donskoy Monastery. Memorial services for children who have passed away are also being held in many other Russian cities. Our entire country prays for them and will do everything that their names never be forgotten. And as I've said, the perpetrators, the criminals, be punished. Now we move to the situation around the so-called Ukrainian crisis. Although we all know what it's all about. It's about a fight against neo-Nazism that, with the support of Western handlers, continues its terror against civilian population, and the Kiev neo-Nazi regime, with the support of Western handlers, continues its terror against the civilian population and civilian infrastructure. During the week of 13 to 19 of July, 433 people were injured at the hands of Ukrainian armed forces. 15 to 24th July, in 9 days, out of them 86 died, including 6 children, and 409 were wounded, including 12 children, and now regions, so that nobody on the planet should say they haven't been to know Kirovsk Oblast, 24th of July. A missile attack on an enterprise in Kirov killed 5 people and 26 were injured. We commented on that on the 24th of July with a message on the site, Belgorod region. On July 18th and 20th, drones with shrapnel were used to attack the passenger buses in the village of Dubovoye. In the first attack, 4 people were injured. In the second attack, a child and 4 women were killed, and actually 27 people were wounded, including a 17-year-old teenager. The most mind-boggling is actually, well, these social statistics are organized this way. Them who call adolescents or teenagers should not be treated as children, but you know, what are they aged 17 or 18? Between the 15th and to 23rd July, Ukrainian armed forces strikes in the region killed 16 people and wounded at least 134, including the young man mentioned above, a 13-year-old girl, 2 16-year-old girls and a 18-year-old girl, and 2 young men aged 16 and 18. Terrorists damaged equipment at the Belgorod reservoir hydraulic structures. Now, Bryansk Oblast, on the 16th of July, enemy drone strikes in Grad multiple launch rocket systems struck the village Suzemka, killing 3 people, including a 15-year-old girl and her grandmother, wounding 16 others. On the 22nd of July, drone strikes killed 1 person and injured 4 others. Voronezh Oblast, on the night of the 23rd of July, drone crashed during a massive air raid, causing a fire in a private home in the Voronezh suburb. A 3-year-old boy was killed and his parents were wounded. Donetsk Republic, from the 15th to 23rd of July, shelling and drone strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces killed 5 people and wounded more than 20, including an infant, a girl born in 2008, and 3 ambulance crew members. Zaporozhye Oblast, during the same period, 3 people were killed, at least 24 wounded by Ukrainian armed forces. A school building was damaged in the village of Priazovsk on the night into the 25th of July. A drone attacked innocent people in a tourist base, and 4 children were killed. Krasnodar Krai, on the 21st of July, debris from a downed enemy drone fell on a 7-year-old girl in Sochi. Ukrainian drone attacks on the night of July 22 killed a security guard in Armavir and a girl in Krasnodar and wounded 10 others. Kursk Oblast, from 15th to 23rd of July, drone and artillery attacks killed 1 person and wounded 23 others, including 4 girls between the ages of 16 to 20. And a Belarusian citizen, on the 19th of July, enemy drones struck 4 apartment buildings in Kursk, blocks of flats in Kursk, a bus stop and a grocery store in Lgov. Lugansk People's Republic, 10 people were killed and there were 35 injured in enemy attacks in the region on the same days, including 2 children aged 10 and 14 and 5 emergency services personnel coming home from extinguishing a fire. Moscow region, on the night of the 18th of July, Ukrainian drone strikes on civilian infrastructure in several towns killed 1 civilian and injured 61 people, including 57 in Elektrostal. A drone strike on the night of July 20 injured 10 civilians, including an 11-year-old girl and 3 Chinese citizens. Republic of Crimea, from the 17th to 23rd of July, 4 people killed and 23 injured in enemy attacks, including 2 children, and 17 residents were killed in a drone strike on a multi-story building in Yalta on the night of July 22nd. Stavropol Krai, or region, territory. On the night of July 22nd, 5 people were injured as a result of an enemy drone attack on a warehouse complex in Ivinomisk and the resulting fire Tambov region. On the night of the 18th of July, cynical Ukrainian armed forces drone attack on a Wildberries warehouse in Kotovsk killed 7 employees working in the night shift and injured 25 others. All drones were loaded with ballistic missiles to maximize casualties with metal shrapnel, to maximize casualties. Kherson Oblast, from 15 to 23 of July, 9 people were killed and at least 43 injured. Yaroslav Oblast, while repelling a massive drone strike on July 16, a man was killed and 4 others were injured by the debris. They know that in the battlefield they will not gain. This is why they strike the civilians. For all that, punishment is to follow, and the armed forces and law enforcement of Russia will deliver the punishment, and the law enforcement agencies continue to gather evidence to hold Kiev regime functionaries, militants, and Ukrainian troops, command and foreign mercenaries accountable for war crimes and terrorism. For terrorist activities in the Kursk region in 2025, Ukrainian armed forces, militants Roman Shapoval, 16 years of imprisonment, Vasily Buhalo and Valery Nikitenko, 15 years of imprisonment each, were sentenced in person to lengthy terms, and other Azov regiment, which is a prohibited entity, mercenaries Sergei Chimashov and Alexei Peshivtsev were sentenced to 14 and 19.5 years in prison respectively. Colombian mercenaries Meneses Edarmando Pipicaño and Argotti Julio Cesar Burbaño, who fought on the side of the Ukrainian forces, were sentenced in absentia to 14 and 13.5 years in prison. The court has sentenced Eldoradas Butamas, a journalist who, with the Lithuanian National Radio and Television, to 20 years in prison in absentia. He was involved in providing financial support to Lithuanian mercenaries who fought on the side of the Kiev regime in Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, and well as to the Ukrainian forces and units involved in terrorists. Well, on July 15th, the Ukrainian Statehood Day, and this is the so-called celebration of that day, witch huddle, I'd say. Sovereign Ukraine had a right to celebrate their statehood or Independence Day, but actually it was originally scheduled to coincide with the day of the Christianization or conversion of Rus on July the 28th. But since 2024, following the artificial transition to the Gregorian Church calendar, it has been moved back 2 weeks. The so-called 5th Ukraine Southeastern Europe Summit, in inverted commas, held in Kiev was timed to coincide with this date. Its participants became the main protagonists of the festivities. It was called the Ukrainian Statehood Day, and naturally, well, people remember their heroes of the past and remember their past and have theatrical performances related to their national symbols and decorate their own nationals, but the Kiev regime makes it coincide with another date and engages international participants, which actually dilutes this statehood, and they've been actually inviting those who master and command them to attend the festivities. So these participants of the Ukraine Southeastern Europe Summit became the main protagonists of those festivities. Just a short example, a brief example to cite. If a family marks an important family holiday like a marriage anniversary or a birthday of a family member, something related to the family, this family's history, but at the same time they invite as the guests of honor someone who never bore any relation to the family. So, and this accounts for it. So, and those people that don't have anything to do with Ukrainian statehood were given a walk through sacred, so to say, sites and places associated with, what do you think? Just try to fancy where the Ukrainian statehood was born, where the origins are.
Places linked to the events of the anti-constitutional coup of 2014 and correspondingly the current conflict situation. Everything that happened beforehand doesn't count, apparently. However, the planned visit to Bucha was cancelled for that reason, one reason or another, due to concerns about Russian military strikes. To further drive home on the point of this, Ukrainians sounded air raid siren and even set up a massive fire in a warehouse in one of the districts of the capital, and creating this black smoke to create a smoke screen for foreign guests, and created something similar to Halloween celebrations. And European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen received a special program dedicated to her, and she is one who is especially responsible for Ukrainian statehood. And what would it be without her? It would be prosperous, if not for other stakeholders from the Western Europe. The whole essence of Madame von der Leyen is not linked with its home country, Germany, not even the European Union, but the financial groups that she is directly linked to, that don't care about the fate of Europe, Western or Central Europe or Eastern one, as long as it fits their close-minded interests. And just to think of it, this inviting someone to a celebration dedicated to your own statehood, and they organized an exhibition especially for her. Now we are passing on to the third part. Just to think of it, how could it get any worse? I tried to not believe it. The Mazepa Trail in the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra, and they showed the Uspensky Cathedral allegedly damaged by Russian strikes. And there were talks about creation of a Ukrainian pantheon to rebury the Ukrainian actors of the Second World War, and this is all sponsored by the Western officials. They are giving money for this, for all these those wretches, collaborationist wretches, to be exhumed from the European Union countries, to be transferred to those pantheons. However, this didn't particularly concern Ursula von der Leyen. She was far more interested in the integration of Ukrainian defense enterprises into the European military-industrial complex. She made no secret of her admiration for Europe becoming a production rear line for the Ukrainian armed forces, declaring the presence of safe and reliable sites in EU capable of significantly increasing military production as a good thing. Those are the very same, I remind everyone, for those who are asking for a place at the table of negotiations, I would like to remind everyone, the desire for peace once again became obvious, so to say, the desire for peace taken in brackets. For her zeal in supporting the Kiev regime on its path to European integration, her significant contribution to aiding Ukraine, quote, end of quote, the head of the European Commission became the first person to be awarded the Order of Europe, awarded personally by Vladimir Zelensky. And this is all during the holiday linked to Ukrainian statehood. And this order was dedicated to Europe. They have diluted Ukraine on Bankovaya Street. Apparently touched by such honors, Madame von der Leyen stated that she recalls her trip to Bucha, especially difficult for her almost every day. As the saying goes, she was caught red-handed, and we couldn't imagine a better self-incriminating admission of this staged anti-Russian provocation. Remember those lists with the surnames, and the list of the alleged victims of Bucha, which no one ever saw. Of course, there have been a lot of lies surrounding the conflict, but there is a very simple and very modern step that could have been done a long time ago. Just publish the lists of those that they are so concerned about, detailing names, surnames, dates of birth. And second thing they could have done is to show the place when they are buried. This could be done by those people who cherish the memory of those who have allegedly died, especially if it's claimed that they died en masse as part of some criminal act. Where is everything connected to it? There is nothing. Why is that? Because there hasn't been anything in the first place. Also, we saw Sir Keir Starmer, former British PM, who couldn't but spent his first days in retirement any other way. On July 16, he has made an announced farewell visit to Kiev before his resignation. His visit was disrupted by the change of government in Ukraine itself and the resulting political upheaval. Ultimately, Sir Keir Starmer contented himself with meeting with Mr. Zelensky, to whom he reported on his cabinet's work to aid Ukraine. He cited London's annual provision of £3.5 billion per year until 2031 for Kiev's military needs, the transfer of approximately 250,000 drones, 8,000 missiles, and 350,000 artillery shells, as well as the escalation of sanctions pressure on Russia, among his personal achievements. He announced this day, saying that the Western minority has accustomed themselves to thinking about this new normalcy, so that everything could be perceived as it's shown in the media as something normal. Just think of it. Who is the prime minister of a country reporting to? No matter the country or the analogous position, the head of the administration, prime minister, doesn't matter. The key person in the government, the key leaders of the country, on the eve of his resignation, who is he reporting to? Their own people. They're holding events. They are coming to the parliament or some legislature institution. They meet with the representative of the popular movements representing their party. In each country, there are some procedures and traditions in place. Now, what we see is a representative of Western minority is arriving with a report on his accomplished work. He is coming to the Bankovaya Street. What does this resemble? This resembles a ritual, as if they should bend the knee before some idols that they have taught everyone to worship, to report on the work accomplished, without mentioning that this work in the first place is the scope of sabotaging their own countries, their own stability, or putting mines under their own countries and peoples. No, on the contrary, they are proud of what they've done and what they've accomplished. Recently, we heard Starmer say with no less glee that his administration saw the British Parliament the most homosexual of its kind in the world. just to understand the level of the people occupying those posts and the Western community trying to promulgate and continue this dictate of the will to the entirety of the world. Also, Starmer, and you mentioned and announced Britain's intention to raise £300 million together with Sweden for the production and delivery of new 16 Gripen E fighter jets, a third of which would be British-made, to the Ukrainian armed forces by 2021. He also particularly highlighted the centenary partnership agreement signed in January 2025. Usually people, when they are coming with a visit to other countries at the end of their tenure, they are announcing or reporting about the projects that would be defining to improve the livelihood of the future generation. What could be relevant in that regard? Obviously, the questions of technology. The entirety of the world is now in discussion about the artificial intelligence technologies and new ways of medicine, especially after 2020 in the pandemic. There is a heightened interest in everything that relates to medicine, environment, which used to be an important priority area for the West, the so-called human rights. Why am I saying so-called? Because I'm talking about the West's interpretation of human rights. Of course, nothing of that sort was mentioned. He only mentioned the things that would be an obvious continuation of Western minorities policy, and he talked about this in with pride. And for such outstanding results in sponsoring the conflict, Sir Keir Starmer was awarded the Ukrainian Order of Freedom. Upon receiving the award, he assured Zelensky of London's unwavering pro-Kiev position, regardless of any change in British government. No matter who is in power in the UK, the chief desires to inflict maximum damage to Russia, to provoke a confrontation dangerous for Europe, regardless of the costs, including those to its own country. It's irrevocable. Now, a couple of words about the extremist website called Mirror Tvorets, or Peacemaker. This is a criminal practice to place the personal data of Russian citizens in different foreign databases, especially of an extremist kind. On July 14th, Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs placed one of its founders of the portal, Mr. Georgy Tsuka, on the wanted list. He was previously included in our country's list of extremists and terrorists. The website was founded in 2014 in close cooperation, if not under supervision, of the Ukrainian intelligence agencies. It posts the personal data of individuals the website's creators believe are involved in law breaking and crimes against Ukraine's, as they formulate it, Ukraine's national security. What does this signify? Anyone who expresses any opinion that differs from the official position or contradicts the narratives of the Nazi Kiev regime is automatically becoming the enemy of Ukraine and risks being posted on this website. Essentially, they are forming true of a kind hit lists. It was after the publication on this website that Italian journalist Andrea Uccelli, writer and publicist Oles Buzina, the founder of former Party of Regions deputy Oleg Kalashnikov, and Russian journalist Daria Dugina were murdered. They have been murdered, not just died by themselves. Whenever someone featured on the website dies, their photo is marked with the label liquidated. And this is all happening during the era where there's been more than 100 years since the adoption of the Charter of the Rights of the Person, and they are using technology openly, without any reproach on the part of the Western ruling circles, and all those same things should have been classed as something deeply reproachable, deeply deplorable by the Western media and non-state actors. In addition to politicians, journalists, diplomats, and public figures, the portal also includes information about Russian athletes and cultural figures. In other words, people are sentenced to death for example, athletic achievements and creative work. But it's not the end of it. The most cynical thing that we see is that this website has data about minors, adolescents. Perhaps you might think that we're trying to alter the information, that perhaps those children have already grown. But no, information published on this website includes children, includes minors. While such cases were previously isolated in character, now children are being added in droves. Among them are not only Russian children, but also from Belarus, from Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Israel, Uzbekistan, and Moldova. As absurd as it may sound, the children are accused of attempting to violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine and deliberately violating the state border of Ukraine. And we're talking about children. They cannot move without being accompanied by an adult or a relative or organizer of a certain trip that are taking all the accountability for their movements. In 2025, more than 100 children and teenagers from Russia found themselves published on this website. In January this year, its database included information on 25 children aged 2 to 3. Just think of it. Aged 2 to 3. In March this year, they were joined by 3 boys aged 6, 10, and 13. One of them was not even a year old when, according to Ukrainian authorities, he, quote, violated the state border of Ukraine. Is that normal? A 1-year-old child, is he providing documents or answering questions? Can he give any explanation as to why he was in that place or another? The oldest is 17. The youngest is only 5. In July this year, the name of a 17-year-old boy appeared on the site accused of illegally crossing the Ukrainian border, which he committed being 9. They tracked him. What an achievement. Such actions violate not only the international law and the Convention on Rights of the Child, but also all existing norms of morality and humanity. I would even say it in the following way. This website is propaganda of anti-morality. Children are turned into targets. Politically charged accusations are attributed to them, information is published, and are put on public display without any regard for their safety, dignity, or their future. You know, many people, when a couple years ago, when they first appeared on the website, when we saw children being featured there, many people interested in this topic and the agenda connected to Ukraine, honestly, perhaps they thought that this was a sort of a provocation. Perhaps the website was hacked, or the Kremlin hackers, the famous Russian hackers, hacked the site to marginalize the Kiev regime. This cannot be happening for real, can it? Well, it can. Let's close our eyes. Let's ignore it. Just let's think that there are no children on this website. Now we see dozens, hundreds of such names on the website. This violates all principles of international law, humanitarian law, and morality. This is a cynical, cynical branding against minors and the deliberate creation of risks for those children and their families. Against this backdrop, the lamentations of the Kiev regime on international platforms about their concern for children's rights and their accusations leveled against Russia of violating children's rights appear cynical and even farcical. And this is a self-admittance of guilt. I also mentioned briefly the creation of Ukrainian National pantheon in the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra. Usually I say something along the lines to journalists and other participants of the briefing who are trying to attract attention. I will warn everyone that perhaps not everyone will perhaps be able to handle it, because the things I'm about to talk about are perhaps not for the weak-willed. Perhaps if you don't find the strength within yourself to face it, I will not judge you. On July 17, the head of the Ukrainian Institute of National Remembrance and well-known Hitler admirer, and it's exactly what he is. I'm not trying to label him. Alexander Arfurov revealed some details of Bankovy's plan to create the Ukrainian National Pantheon in the territory of the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra. According to him, this memorial cemetery is not intended for collecting relics. This is the Kiev-Pечерsk Lavra, after all.
This is the place where monks lived as per the tenets of Christianity, where neither politics nor fashion had the upper hand, but what went through millennia, the Orthodox faith, Christianity. And now they've been saying that this is not a place for collecting relics. And this Tver also said that this will not be converted into a large-scale cemetery, according to him. Not 300 to 500 people will be buried there, but several dozen prominent Ukrainians. It's a quote. He emphasized that the ashes of such classic Ukrainian figures as Taras Shevchenko, Lesya Ukrainka, and Ivan Franko and Ivan Kotlyarevsky will not be transferred to the Volta. And apparently the authorities intend to give preference exclusively to those known for bloody crimes only. Well, in this case, I cannot but mention that Taras Shevchenko and Lesya Ukrainka are the lucky ones not to be put on the same string, because it is a place for something different, a place for those the Ukrainian Orthodox Church selected to be buried there, not for those who are used as a justification of their insane acts. So it's very hard to comment upon schizophrenic delirium, but we've got to do that, otherwise no one in the global community knows what has been happening in Ukraine, and they will not have faith in that. They will not take that seriously. Apparently, the authorities intend to give preference exclusively to those known for bloody crimes, and the remains of Bandera, Shushkevich, and other Nazi scum will be buried in the Pantheon, which would be an unprecedented, cynical desecration and sacrilege of the holy monastery. Just fancy. Earlier, the idea of creating a pantheon on the monastery grounds was approved by the head of the so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Epiphanius Domenko, who believed that it was necessary to restore historical memory and properly perpetuate the names of outstanding statesmen and military leaders, end of quote. And this convincingly demonstrates that the schismatics who seized the Volta, or the destructors of the Orthodox faith in Ukraine, view it solely as a venue and a platform for political actions and entertainment shows commissioned by the secular authorities. Just a culinary show right amid the Lent there. And now all those indecency is put on display for Bankovaya, for those who rule in Ukraine, the Volta of Kiev, has ceased to be a place to communicate with God, but instead it is a place to worship Satan. I cannot put it otherwise. And we've been witnessing the commemoration of the anti-heroes as heroes. This is prompted by the devil. All the above facts confirm the urgency of the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats emanating from its territory. These goals will be certainly achieved. And now let's look what causes the utmost hatred of the Kiev regime. The Kiev regime is suffering defeat not only on the battlefield but also on the language front. Despite unprecedented oppression, Russian-speaking residents of Ukraine, who constitute the majority, continue to think and communicate in the great and powerful language of their ancestors, of their childhood, of their parents, of their schools, of their books. In desperation, the Zelensky regime is intensifying not popularization of the Ukrainian language, but instead intensifying repression. Old school, bricks and mortar, with possible repression. On the 15th of July and the 22nd of this year, bills were submitted one after another to the Rzhev Rada, proposing amendments to more than 24 laws aimed at tightening language legislation. The bills stipulate the inadmissibility of the use of Russian in extracurricular education, private educational institutions and children's recreation activities, public performances, screenings of works and the reproduction of phonograms and video clips in the language of the aggressor state are barred and prohibited. What about the official language of the United Nations? Is it possible? Oh, probably it is. So this is self-deception. They are blind-ended. So they look like a dog that has bit its tail and spins around its own axis. So it is prohibited. Something that is so dear for millions of people. Fines for individuals are expected to increase to 17,000 hryvnias, which is 30,000 rubles for the first offence, and more to come, 25.5, which is 44,000 rubles for repeat offences. This is despite the current subsistence level in Ukraine is 3,200 hryvnias. So this is just penalizing the use of mother tongue. You know, just recently I just had to watch an interview of a former music performer who used to perform in this country, being a national of our country. I cannot say whether he has given up our nationality or not. So he used to be popular in this country. And later he left Russia and he decided to support the Kiev regime with, what do you think? And this is about someone who composed and performed songs. This is an anti-utopia, a dystopia that could hardly be fancied by any futurist. He decided to support Ukraine and back the Kiev regime by not singing songs in the Russian language. So he has been composing them in Russian for decades, performing and earning and building his own subsistence and providing for his family. And he has probably been receiving some royalty. Fees and payouts for what he finds on what you may find on the line. So, which is a testimony of the self-destruction. This is EDSC that has been destroying human mind, human cognition. Like another breaking news coming from the Baltics: you cannot sing songs in the Russian language now. And the public figures who became stars thanks to these songs in Russian are now banned from from playing these songs and singing them. This is a werewolf nation, a werewolf state. So, for legal entities, fines of up to 170,000 hryvnias are planned for the public performance of Russian language music in retail, catering, and service establishment. Particular attention is being paid to expanding the powers of the language ombudsman, a pillar of the repressive mechanism built into the system of the state institutions. This punitive body encourages snitching and employs a vast network of, I can call them agents or spies or whistleblowers. What are they? Who are they? Well, the most interesting thing is, well, that the repressions and snitching and persecution and inability to promote one's own national component were the reasons for them to break away from the USSR. The origins of their breaking away from the USSR in our country, they were not able, they said, to withstand what happened anymore. I do not know any other historical epoch, that would see something similar to such punitive measures applied in this country. So this is what they ended up, where they ended up. And they make their own nationals. They compel to reject our music and the books, the works of art, works of literature. They ban them and bar them from that. Special heed is paid to expanding the scope. In the first half of 2026, Language Ombudsman Yelena Ivanovska received 1,378 complaints about the use of the Russian language. They don't have any other issues outstanding. Their economy is booming and blooming, and their technology is state-of-the-art, and they've got public concordia and consent, and everybody kinda is envious, and now they decided to ban mother tongue. And this Sprachenführer office said that it's 12 denunciations more than year on year. A third of the violators live in Kiev, followed by Odessa, Kharkiv, and Dnipropetrovsk. Well, for Ukraine, with a population of 25 million, whose population is by no means averse to the Russian language and communicates fluently in it, these numbers are negligible, you know, around 1,000. So it's negligible. The level of institutionalization of the repressive instrument, which violates both the constitution and the country's international obligations, is horrifying. The agency's official website cites several illustrative examples of how language wardens harass Russian-speaking citizens, primarily teachers, who at great personal risk selflessly ensure children's right to education, communication and development. Still, those kids cannot gauge their child's mindset against the novel developments of the Ukrainian legislation, and they speak the language that is their mother tongue. On the 3rd of June, a coach at a children's sports section in Kyiv was fined 5,000 hryvnias. His crime, so to say, consisted of, I quote, using a non-state language during classes with children as well as during discussions regarding the training schedule, costs, sports equipment and rules of conduct of the classes. What comes next, I wonder? They're gonna look which numbers are used. It's Arab numbers will be banned. What comes next? I just ask a question that I asked before, and the Mendeleev periodic table is something that concerns me. How much are they going to fine for quoting the Mendeleev chemical table? Or will they cite anything else instead? Like a physical education teacher, just if asked a question, responds in Russian and receives a fine, 5,000 hryvnias. And for them, 5,000 hryvnias is 2/3 of their salary. Why? What for? On the 26th of June, it was reported that a similar offence was being charged against a coach, the Children's and Youth Sports School in Bezludovka. A case of repeated use of non-state language in the educational process while performing official duties within a year was established. The man was charged 8.5 thousand hryvnias, which is tantamount to his monthly salary. On the 30th of June and 22nd of July, administrative penalties in the form of fines totaling 3.4 thousand hryvnias were imposed on 3 Kyiv teachers for using the language of an aggressor state during educational process. End of quote. And I suggest to the teachers of Ukraine, next time you are best to just say you spoke the official language of the United Nations, as the punishers themselves explain. Such fines are intended as a preventive measure. They are an intimidation, actually, exercise. In other words, they are no different from the plagues reading for contacts with partisans. And the Nazis hung around the necks of residents like the yellow David stars, and actually this is the same fashion, the same ideology, and it smells of them practices coming to the fore in Ukraine now. For now, the Nazi followers limit themselves to depriving the offenders and their families of their livelihoods. But we know what it started with back in the Nazi times. During the 7 years since the law on ensuring the functioning of the Ukrainian language as the state language was enacted, linguistic terror has not only become the basis of state policy, but also taken the form of a sophisticated mechanism for infringing on human rights. I remind you that Ukraine is the only country in the world where an entire language and a UN official language is banned in all spheres of public life. We regard the shameful silence of relevant international bodies on this matter as complicity in linguistic persecution. Restoring the rights of Russian speakers in Ukraine is one of the most important goals of the special military operation. We would like to remind you that in accordance with our constitution, Russian is the official language throughout the Russian Federation. Furthermore, the republics that comprise Russia have the right to establish their own official languages, which are used alongside the official one. And there are rumors that you cannot receive education in other languages, which is not true. They can establish their own official languages used alongside the official Russian language. It's worth noting that in Crimea, the official language is also Crimean Tatar and attention Ukrainian. So legislators in the Rada should actually act in consistence with their constitution and look into the mirror. And I'm afraid they will flinch in horror.
28th of July is a special date in our history. 138 years since the adoption of Christianity in Rus. This day also commemorates the Holy Prince Vladimir, equal to the Apostles. A tale of bygone years notes that these pivotal events took place in ancient city of Chersonesos, which the Slavs called Korsun. Symbolically, this ancient polis was a refuge for the first followers of Christianity as early as the 1st century AD. Today, the city is, without exaggeration, one of the gems of the Russian historical heritage. Incidentally, we will discuss this in corresponding topic a bit later. A number of Russian foreign philosophers see Prince Vladimir's decision as a truly civilizational defining choice, characterizing it as a turn away from pagan barbarism towards Europe. The Europe that we knew in its best iteration for a long time. That is precisely why it is especially sad to see currently we see what is happening in the old world with regards to different stakeholders destroying the Christian religion, Christian faith. We are about to publish a corresponding report of the review of persecutions against Orthodox Church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, the third such report of its kind, with detailed descriptions and examples for everyone to see what is happening really. This is just the apogee of this lawlessness is Ukraine. For over a decade, a regime that has seized power in that country is waging war on history, not the history of the regime, but the history of the country that is being ruled by this regime. The persecution of the canonical Orthodox Church continues unabated, with churches seized and clergy parishioners attacked. There's also an ongoing inventorization of holy relics in the Kiev Pesha's Lavra, which is indignant and disgusting. Such shameful processes pursue one goal: to eradicate Orthodoxy in Ukraine, to eliminate it throughout the territory of Ukraine, and to cleanse it from Ukrainian history. Against this backdrop, all wise, all sensible individuals would be wise to think that they need to recall history and reflect on its lessons, and tomorrow's significant anniversary is an excellent opportunity to do so. I would like to say once again, Russia will continue to do everything in its power to defend Orthodoxy and preserve our shared Slavic history. Now on UNESCO, on July 23rd, the UNESCO committee in Busan, during its Busan meeting in South Korea, decided to add the ancient city of Tori Chersonesos and its Kora heritage site to the list of World Heritage in Danger. We view this move as evidence of dangerous threat towards politicization of this purely expert type of UNESCO body. I would like to remind everyone that Chersonesos was included in the World Heritage list at the 37th session of the World Heritage Committee in 2014. And since 2014, Ukraine has had no role in the management of this historical site and accordingly cannot provide a reliable assessment of its condition. Furthermore, since 2014, the UNESCO World Heritage Center has refused to accept documentation prepared by the management of the Torik Chersonesos Museum. And our willingness to receive UNESCO representative to monitor the situation at the site has been ignored. They want, on the one hand, to protect it. On the other hand, they don't accept and recognize the documentation and facts as to the current state of this site. And they are receiving this information from those who are ignoring their own heritage. We've mentioned this plenty today. Once again, I would like to emphasize that Russia has significantly contributed to preserving the outstanding universal value of this ancient city and its monuments, including the work to protect the ancient ruins from human impact, and also that we performed archaeological excavation that allow for more detailed understanding of the site historical periodization. The real threat to the Torik Chersonesos comes explicitly from the Kiev regime. Unique monuments of Crimea are regularly subjected to Ukrainian terrorist attacks and drone strikes, and there is a danger of debris falling from missiles and drones supplied to Kiev by its Western sponsors. What do you think? Did anyone from the UNESCO Secretariat, from these specialized agencies, once mentioned any type of concern or some words of condemnation in relation to those attacks against World Heritage Sites? No, of course not. Russia strictly adheres to its obligation under the 1972 Convention concerning the protection of the world cultural and natural heritage and is doing everything in our power to preserve the Torik Chersonesos and its monuments for the contemporary visitors and future generations in the current challenging circumstances. We also noted that the House of Commons of the UK has prepared another report on Russia. British MPs wish to see what is the state of the bilateral, as they say, UK-Russia relations. Isn't that clear to someone? Or still, they can be characterized, the state of those relations can be characterized in a couple of words. And the same goes for those who has led to the current situation. The British MPs are also very interested about the prospects of a long-term strategic approach existing in London designed for the post-conflict period. Especially puzzling given the fact that Sir Keir Starmer, former PM, visited Kiev to announce what they were doing to continue the conflict. What is this dichotomy, bipolar disorder? What is this that we are witnessing? Lie to me once, shame on you. Lie to me twice, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know. Perhaps there's an expert commentary contained in this report. We would also like to share our own ideas, because although we doubt that the report authors and experts possess objective data. And let's talk about our relations between Russia and the UK. I will try to stay civil. Leaving aside the remaining diplomatic channels and intergovernmental contacts are virtually frozen, including dialogue at the highest and at the top level and the high level. The UK and our country are the only P5 states that don't have mutual military diplomatic presence in such difficult times. Trade and investment ties have been reduced to a minimum. Interaction between regions and sister cities has been suspended. There are virtually no cultural and academic exchanges, and all this occurred solely due to the actions of the British side. Russia has repeatedly stated that we are fundamentally ready to engage with London, provided that this engagement is conducted on a mutually respectful and equal basis, fully taking into account our national interests, including in the area of security, and especially giving the idea that there are such things as national interests, especially when it comes to security. In turn, the undermining of relations was the result of targeted anti-Russian measures taken by the UK authorities. In 2018, London used the Salisbury provocation to seriously restrict channels of bilateral dialogue and push other European countries to do the same. In 2022, it ramped up sanctions pressure. In 2024, under a made-up pretext, it expelled our military attaché. In 2025, it launched the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, under which a regime of enhanced scrutiny is applied to anyone attempting to interact with our authorities being under British jurisdiction in a discriminatory manner. The UK politicians have used every means possible to discourage their own citizens and organizations from engaging with Russia, attempting to falsely demonize our country to prevent first-hand information from reaching the British media. We already mentioned in much detail what has been done to Russian journalists, and the links will be additionally provided in the text of today's briefing. All this was accompanied by steps to create an anti-Russia out of Ukraine, and after the launch of the special military operation, they have done their utmost to undermine the 2022 negotiation process when the British PM, at the time Boris Johnson, personally arrived to Kiev to talk the Ukrainian side out of participating in peaceful negotiations. They have outdone themselves to consolidate the Western countries' efforts in confronting our country in Ukraine. They are not even simply positioning themselves as ideologists and key sponsors of the Kiev regime, pumping the Ukrainian armed forces with weapons and military equipment. They boast about this, they're proud about this, and as Mr. Starmer mentioned this, they are gleeful about it. They are hypocritically ignoring the fact that they are sacrificing Ukrainian lives and are directly involved in terrorist attacks on civilian infrastructure in Russia to prolong the conflict for their own interests. The responsibility for this state of affairs lies solely with the UK and particularly the House of Commons. Instead of developing interparliamentary dialogue to serve as a safety net, a backup line of communication in the event of a crisis, or at least to attempts to ensure critical scrutiny of government initiatives, British legislators almost unanimously and quite creatively at that supported the anti-Russian line of successive cabinets and the continuation of the establishment as a whole. The Russia group that existed in the House of Commons was transformed into a Russophobic tribunal after the 2024 elections. Russian Democracy group was established in the British Parliament. In essence, this is a group that is tasked with interfering into internal affairs of a sovereign state. Russian diplomats were banned from appearing in Westminster. Even in the announcement of this current report, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Madam Emily Thornberry, does not advocate for a balanced analysis, but rather peddles some substantiated accusations that can be used for propaganda and justification for further unfriendly steps made by the British government. They are now simply engaged in militarization. They have no other ways to explain to their own population why they need to continue to support the militarization of the Kiev regime. The stakes are very high. The fragility of peace becomes even clearer. And we would recommend that the British parliamentarians who are not just who are really striving for the prosperity of the country, for peace or in Europe, they should use the work on this report to convey to the government the futility of escalating confrontation to try to reverse the negative trends in our bilateral relations. Even minimal progress in our relations would serve the interest not only of simply our countries, but it would also benefit the entirety of the planet. And this is more important than personal political ambitions and the fear of being seen as someone who has not toed the party line, and so on and so forth. Also, what's interesting, on the 14th of July, there was a new statement made by the Danish Defense Intelligence Service. They released a statement announcing its offensive hacking operations against targets abroad, including hacking into information systems and infiltrating the personal mobile devices of foreign citizens. just to think of it, it was the West that was accusing all those actors, including China and DPRK, of hacking operations against the foreign citizens. And now it turns out this is a new norm for the West, that they not only military intelligence services of Denmark are not only doing it, but are also publicly informing everyone about it. The statement outlined the agency's plans to expand its malicious capabilities in the field of information communications technologies. I would like to remind everyone this agency operates a training center for specialists tasked in cyber attacks against undesirable sovereign states, aptly named Hacker Academy. I've always asked myself a question: are the hackers strictly the people that have been appointed by Kremlin, or are there any other types of hackers? And now it turns out that the hackers are officially employed by authorities, for example, in Denmark. In an interview with the Person newspaper on July 15, the head of cyber operations of the Defense Intelligence Service of Denmark, Mark Fidel, openly admitted that the main targets of such attacks are Russia and China. Denmark's destructive cyber activities are not limited to this. Copenhagen provides practical assistance in the digital sphere to the Kiev regime and has contributed to turning Ukraine into a springboard for cyber attacks. There are specific instances of the criminal group IT Army of Ukraine using Danish territory for malicious activities against Russia, as well as some attempts to fraud Russian citizens emanating from Danish IP addresses. Official appeals sent by the Russian embassy in Copenhagen to the national authorities regarding these matters, citing evidence of this illegal activity, have been ignored. Against this backdrop, Copenhagen's regular and founded accusations against the Russian Federation of alleged involvement in certain malicious activities in the information space appear absurd. The true motive behind such propaganda campaigns is to ramp up Russophobia and panic sentiments in society to justify hostile anti-Russian policy, serving to expand the powers and budgets of the intelligence services and agencies, and incurred exorbitant expenditures directed to the militarization of Denmark. Now on some more beautiful things, we noted another yearly Europol report on the trends and evolutions of the terrorist threats in the EU, and regards some of these parts concerning the situation in Ukraine. I would like to point out that although the mindless repetition of anti-Russian slogans in the document, as they say, narratives, doesn't do any credit to European law enforcement professionals. However, they are again and again parroting, regurgitating anti-Russian narratives. They are still doing everything that we warned them against. The situation in Ukraine, that the European Union bears full responsibility for through actively supporting the corrupt and criminal Kiev regime. This whole crisis is backfiring against European security. The Europol states that war could facilitate the acquisition of specialized skills by extremists, the legal traffickers of weapons, and misuse of migration flows, and the further division of EU society. Without corresponding intent, the European police officers have exposed their own authorities, namely the leaders of the European Union, France, Germany, and other EU member states, who are doing everything in their power to ensure this conflict continues. They publicly declare that keeping the Kiev regime afloat is their top priority. Pumping Kiev with weapons, which is then resold by corrupt Ukrainian officials to criminal and extremist groups, is also their priority, despite the fact that those weapons are already starting to turn up in European markets. The Europol identified growing threats for ordinary citizens, being the main group that is paying for these self-destructive policies, contrary to their own national interest. They designated as collateral damage. Now on the situation in Moldova. The developments in Moldova confirm that what we have repeatedly stated, the so-called European project of its leadership is leading on the one hand to a decline in the well-being and the livelihood of its citizens, and on the other hand to a severing of ties with Russia and other CIS countries, which only worsens the domestic economic situation. The Moldovan authorities are not toning down their anti-Russian rhetoric. Just on July 21st, the new Prime Minister, Mr. Tver, speaking about the urgent reforms needed in the country, stated that it won't help anyone if we carry out reforms now, painful but necessary, and then the Russians, for only for the Russians to come and win the elections. You already said that there are no Moldovans anymore, only Romanians in the country. What is this verbal apocalypse that we are hearing from Sandu and her henchmen's cabinet and offices? This is how the new government cares for the well-being of Moldovans. Eager to please its sponsors, Chisinau supports any anti-Russian attempts to any anti-Russian actions carried out by Brussels. On July 13th, the country's leadership joined the so-called coalition of the willing, the union of countries that are preparing armed intervention into Ukraine. According to official information from the Moldovan presidency, participation in the sanctions has been is legally compatible with the status of neutrality enshrined in the constitution, since other neutral states such as Austria and Ireland are also members of this coalition. A genius type of logic. Just take it, just note it, just think about it. They are, just to give an example, they are not committing criminal acts for the express purpose because others are conducting the very same activities. What law does this emanate from? What logic that provides for that?
Well, there has been a lot of uproar in Moldova, and Moldovan officials boast that the country has acceded to 80% of the EU Council decisions on illegal restrictive measures against Russian individuals and legal entities. Well, I'm referring to the people of Moldova, not the bunch of the regime. Will the Moldovan people be better off? No, I think. Well, these sanctions actually cause greater harm to their authors than to Russia. Chisinau cannot help but understand that the Moldovan economy, already in dire straits, is suffering as a result. Well, if we expose the truth that Sandu aims not at developing Moldova, but making Moldova part of Romania, well, it stands to reason then the worse things in Moldova are, the faster the identity of Moldova will be erased, and the easier it's neutralized. As part of Romania, inflation remains stubbornly high under Sandu. Input volumes consistently exceed revenues from Moldovan exports. Moldova's external debt in the first quarter of this year exceeded $12 billion, and foreign direct investment has fallen by almost a half compared to the same period last year. This is not about a country subject to sanctions or prohibitive, restrictive, penalizing measures, as the Biden or the Trump or someone says, the health sanctions, but their parameters are deteriorating. The outflow of the working age population continues. Experts estimate that this year Moldova will become the European anti-leader in rising gas prices for residents. They predict that by autumn, gas prices will rise by almost 15% in Austria, Germany and the Netherlands, in the Baltic states by 20%, but by as much as by 55% in Moldova. They could prove This could prove an unbearable burden for Moldovans. This is an anti-achievement for Sandu. The country's education system is steadily being torn apart. Can someone be accused but for the Sandu regime? Since 2020, when the pro-Western forces have been in power, more than 80 secondary schools and 11 universities have been closed in Moldova. Experts predict that if current trends continue, by 2035 the number of school children in the country will decrease by almost a quarter and the number of universities will be reduced to 4. You know why? This is because people without education will be easier deceived. You could doubt any sort of gibberish to them. However, it seems that the Moldovan authorities are unfazed. Well, I think that their primary concern is to attain the most deplorable outcomes. They are quite active and interested in implementing their sponsors' plans to transform the country into a NATO logistic appendage, organizing the production of UAV components, anti-drone equipment, electronic warfare systems, and on Moldovan soil, training UAV operators for Ukraine. Negotiations are underway. Funding for these projects will be provided through European programs. The country's defense infrastructure is being strengthened. On the 2nd of July, the Moldovan parliament, with a pro-Western majority, passed a bill allocating an additional 8 hectares of land. It has been an agricultural nation, so they may have allocate 8 hectares for animal husbandry, no, or cultivation, no. 8 hectares for the construction of a military base in the Bachoi suburb of Chisinau. All this confirms that official Chisinau has lost even the semblance of independence and is prepared to continue blindly complying with Brussels directives, primarily directed against Russia. God, oh my God, those people who believed in Sandu may be now frustrated. They feel deceived. Some very small numbers hope that when Moldova is fully and finally crippled, they will have some prey. No, they will not. No one will be left alive and standing after this debacle. It's not the interest of the Moldovan society that Sandu is guided, and we talked about sports and we commented on that, but a few words on Germany's refusal to allow Russian athletes to participate in the European Youth Deaf Games. The German Deaf Sports Association, in agreement with the German government, has decided to bar Russian athletes from the EDYG, which will be held in Hanover. The German organizers' stance is a flagrant violation of the Olympic Charter and the principle of political neutrality in sports, as well as the decision of the Executive Board of the International Committee of Sports for the Deaf to fully admit Russian juniors with flag and anthem to competitions held under the auspices of this organization and this European Sports Organization for the Deaf. And cynical it is, definitely, to treat this way the children who are deaf. We are convinced that sport is intended to promote the principles of inclusiveness and equality for people with disabilities who should not become hostages to political agendas, and children are suffered unduly. No one should not be subject to humiliation. We will continue to defend our country's fundamental approaches, countering politicization and discrimination in sports and ensuring the unimpeded access and full participation of athletes in international competitions. We do that not because our athletes are not admitted, but actually we do that because if this Western minority entrenches itself, they will do that to everyone, and the Russian side will seek appropriate measures from international sports organizations against competition organizers who violate established rules. And another date, on the 30th of June, this has marked the Day Against Trafficking in Persons, according to the resolution of the UN General Assembly, Resolution 68-192. The need to combat this negative global phenomenon and strengthen international cooperation to prevent and combat this crime is more urgent than ever. We believe that achieving significant results in the fight against human trafficking is only possible with political will, combined the efforts of governments, businesses and civil society. We consider it important for the UN to maintain its leading role in uniting the efforts of international and national structures involved in the fight against human trafficking. We consider human trafficking to be a multifaceted phenomenon, and outrageous, absolutely associated not only with transactions but also with various forms of exploitation and servitude. Russia is a party to the fundamental international legal instruments on human trafficking. These include the UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and its supplementary protocol to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children, the UN Convention for the Suppression of the Traffic in Persons and the Exploitation of the Prostitution of Others, a supplementary convention on the abolition of slavery, the slave trade, institutions and practices similar to slavery, and we attach great importance to the implementation of the UN Global Plan of Action to Combat Trafficking in Persons, adopted by the General Assembly in 2010. This document aims to increase global understanding of the problem and qualitatively improve the cooperation of all stakeholders in the fight against this criminal enterprise. Our country actively participates in the high-level meeting of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly held on November 24th to 25th, 2025 in New York, where it affirmed its commitment to the Global Plan of Action to Combat Trafficking in Persons and expressed readiness to cooperate with all stakeholders for successful implementation. Following the meeting, a political declaration of the implementation was adopted by consensus. Russia has consistently been supportive of initiatives by Belarusian partners aimed at consolidating efforts within the UN system to combat human trafficking, and would traditionally co-sponsor the UN General Assembly resolution introduced by Belarus improving the coordination of efforts to combat trafficking in persons. The most recent one was adopted on December the 18th. In close coordination with our Belarusian colleagues, we co-sponsor relevant resolutions on the UN Commission on Crime, Prevention and Criminal Justice. We support the work of the Group of Friends United Against Trafficking in Persons, also established at the initiative of Belarus. We consider it is important to continue joint work in this area, which serves our interests in combating human trafficking. On the 27th July, a quarter of a century, it marks a quarter century since the signing of the Declaration on the Principles of Friendly Relationship and Relations and Partnership between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Guinea. It was signed by the two heads of state in Moscow in 2001, and strictly adhering to the spirit and letter of historic document, Moscow Conakry are confidently building a strong architecture of mutually beneficial cooperation based on the principles of equality, respect and consideration of each other's interests. The provisions of the declarations, which enshrine commitment to international law and the UN Charter, remain the unshakable foundation of Russian-Guinean relations. Today, relations between the countries are characterized by a highly dynamic political dialogue. Regular contacts are maintained through the Foreign Ministry, and activities are closely coordinated at the UN and other multilateral forums. We are pleased to know that the convergence of similarity of Russia and Guinea's approaches to key issues on the global agenda, including the creation of the more equitable multipolar world, and strengthening the central role of the United Nations. It's symbolic that the anniversary year has been marked by a significant expansion of bilateral cooperation in trade, economic, investment spheres. Russian-Guinean trade turnover has demonstrated growth. The Republic of Guinea is one of Russia's main trading partners in sub-Saharan Africa. One of Russia's largest companies, Rusal, plays a leading role in this area, having successfully operated in the Guinean mining sector for over 2 decades. The second major Russian economic agent in Guinea is the gold mining company Nord Gold. Russian investors are steadily expanding their production activities in the country. Ties in healthcare sector continue to actively develop. Rospotrebnadzor watchdog specialists are permanently deployed in the Republic of Guinea, thanks to the high level of professionalism it has been possible to effectively respond to the Ebola epidemic that broke out in West Africa in 2014. During the COVID-19 epidemic in 2021, 400,000 doses of the Sputnik V vaccine worth $4 million were delivered to Conakry. Rospotrebnadzor continues to implement competitive measures to prevent and combat infectious diseases in Guinea, including the fight against such dangerous diseases as Ebola, dengue, and Lassa fever. In recent years, several medical centers have opened in a number of communities. We particularly note the humanitarian component of the bilateral cooperation. Thousands of Guinean citizens have received higher education at Soviet and Russian universities, and totally today they form the backbone of their national elite. Currently, the quota for state scholarships for Guinea remains high, 164 places. We look forward to further expanding educational, scientific, technical ties and training high-skilled personnel to meet the needs of the Guinean economy. We are confident that the significant accumulated experience of joint work allows us to look confidently into the future. Russia reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the principles of the 2001 declaration and its readiness to expand the full range of bilateral ties with the friendly Republic of Guinea for the benefit of peoples of both countries and the interest of maintaining peace and stability. And tomorrow, the independence of Peru will be marked 205th anniversary of the Republic of Peru. The independence was obtained in 1821. On the same day, the newly elected president, Keiko Fujimori, takes office. We wish the fraternal Peruvian people peace, prosperity, and well-being as they enter a new stage of their country's development. Peru is an important partner for Russia and Latin America and the Caribbean, with whom we have shared over 160 years of friendship, comradeship, mutual understanding, support, people-to-people, sympathy and contacts. We hope that such a solid foundation for our bilaterals will ensure the continued and progressive development of our entire range of ties, the restoration of political dialogue and foreign policy cooperation, and the expansion of practical cooperation in trade, economy, science, technology, education, and the humanities. And another red letter day is, the anniversary of Prince Kurakin, a statesman and diplomat of Russia. He was born on the 30th of July, 1676 in Moscow. In a couple of days, 300 years since his birth will be marked. He was one of Peter the Great's closest associates and served as his chamberlain, a personal servant to the Tsar's chambers. Like many children of Russian nobles, he was enlisted in the military from an early age, participating in Peter's two campaigns in 1694 and 1696. At the age of 20, he was among the first to send to Venice to study navigation and European languages, as well as to observe foreign customs and behavior. During the early years of the Northern War, he participated in many battles against the Swedes. In 1707, he visited Rome on a diplomatic mission. From 1709, he served as ambassador to Hanover, England and Holland, carrying out personal assignments for Peter I, commissioning ships and inviting foreign specialists to serve Russia. His notebooks contain notes on government structure and etiquette, records on the staffing of ambassadors and nobles, political news, and many other things. He possessed exceptional intelligence and broad perspective, quickly mastering the languages of the countries he visited. He spoke virtually all European languages. The prince easily established contacts with statesmen. Upon returning to Russia, he was appointed and promoted to Major General. In this rank, he commanded the Semenovsky regiment, serving as at the epicenter of the Battle of Poltava with the Swedes. In 1713 to 14, he represented Russia at the Congresses of Utrecht and Braunschweig. On the 15th of August 1717, he conducted a treaty of friendship, trade, and the restoration of peace in Europe with France and Prussia. In 1722, during Peter the Great's Persian campaign, Kurakin was entrusted with guidance of all actions of Russian ambassadors abroad. End of quote. Boris made a significant contribution to the implementation of Russia's primary foreign policy objectives of the time, facilitating the strengthening strengthening of relations with European powers, primarily France and the Netherlands. Peter the Great highly praised the prince's diplomatic achievements, awarding him with the Order of St. Andrew the First, called in the highest order of the Russian Empire. Kraken left behind a vast documentary legacy, extensive diplomatic and business correspondence, embassy protocols, instructions on negotiations, practices, diaries, travel notes, and his own writings on the history of the era of the Peter the Great and the Northern War. His archive, only partly published, contains unique material illustrating events from 300 years ago, which continue to serve as an invaluable source for studying the history of Russia and its diplomacy. On the 20th of July, joint stock company Marka issued a state postage stamp dedicated to the 350th anniversary of the birth of this prominent statesman and diplomat. And a very important announcement, since in October 8th to 10th in Moscow, at the venue of Mechstein, the Gorky Park will host the second Global Digital Forum, and this is a young format to discuss global trends and come up with joint solutions and decisions for the sake of a truly fair global digital world order. The first forum was held in Nizhny Novgorod last June, and it was in the limelight of international community.
The Russian MFA also participated in the first installment of this forum. We conducted a special session, responsible fact-checking in the era of post-truth, new opportunities for cooperation, during which we discussed and condemned destructive actions of the West and IT corporations and media under its control. We underlined the critical importance of digital sovereignty and efforts to protect objective reality, promotion of truth and facts, the combat against fake news, and the support of global civic expert initiatives. Around 750 foreign experts from more than 100 countries of the world are expected to participate in the forum. On them, representatives of national organizations, ministers of digital development and their deputies, counselors to advisors to heads of states when it comes to technologies, ambassadors, heads of digital technologies and startups, representatives of NGOs, universities, journalists, and bloggers. Guests will be able to familiarize themselves with the achievements of Russian IT industry, which will be demonstrated in exhibitions. The platform of the forum can be used to sign agreements on relevant topics with the position of Russian foreign companies. The platform of the Global Digital Forum is a great opportunity to discuss relevant topics relating technologies. I'm convinced that the participants will be drawn by the topic of reinforcing digital sovereignty and the development of independent practical resolutions and solutions against the backdrop of growing censorship and new colonial activities on the part of the collective West. The official website of the forum has already started registering participants. The link will be provided in the text version of the briefing. You can also see the business program of the forum there, containing around 40 sessions dedicated to relevant challenges and issues of digital transformation, creative economy challenges, and breakthroughs related to the development of technologies of AI. Also, there will be workshops and seminars held for bloggers and IT journalists. There will be a very important event, and trust me, this will be an event of large magnitude. I'm ready to start answering your questions. I know that the youth guard is with us right now. Let's give you the floor. Let's let you be the first to take the floor, please. Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I represent the volunteer regiment of the Young Guard. Over the past few years, the Russian diplomacy has done this significant work to build us with a majority. However, we see some Russophobic attitudes towards our country. This is also being noticed when it comes to dealing with the youth, and we need to point out that such Russophobic statements destabilize the youth. Russophobic, I thought that I heard a different word. This directly relates to the work that we are doing. How can young Russians react to such statements, and how can they counter such provocations? The same as any other Russians, regardless of their age, in a resolute manner. Your organization, many party organizations and public organizations are linked with other topics, sports, music, culture, science, education, social sphere. No matter, you can use your participation to counter this nationalism. And this is exactly nationalism that we're talking about, not some political competition or some disagreements when it comes to political, diplomatic, and international nuances. Outright nationalism, when people are destroyed, segregated, humiliated according to their national character. It is being reflected in different ways. Sometimes they talk about nationalities or ethnicities or religion, or what they said about racial superiority. We also heard that. We saw those reflections, but I must say that it seems to me that besides our common national response, we are also responding in a way that we have launched a large amount of initiatives where youth from different countries in the territory of our country or in the framework of some of our organizations is talking, is conducting joint work, and we show even when we see this hellish, satanic hatred in our regard, we preserve our dignity, and by giving a dignified answer, we are open to those citizens, even in the unfriendly countries, that are not affected by this Russophobia. And this is one of the unique examples in history. It seems to me that perhaps this became possible because our country has a multi-century history of this dialogue of cultures and civilizations. Our country is an initiator of a broad scope of dialogue platforms. We are ready to reflect it in platforms to create platforms for the creation of a just world order, forever striving for justice, full of opportunities for everyone in the world. I can enumerate some successful projects and initiatives, and those are real initiatives that are already in place, that are working. For example, from September 11th to 17th in Yekaterinburg, as you may know, there will be an International Youth Festival taking place in Yekaterinburg. It will unite young leaders worldwide to search for like-minded individuals, for dialogue, to overcome nationalism, xenophobia, to search for some points for common growth, to exchange opinions and experiences. After the end of the main program, the foreign participants will be invited for regional expeditions to 35 different regions of the Russian Federation. There will be different cultural programs that have been created within this youth festival. There are also international friendship clubs where participants cooperate with representatives from 100 and something countries of the world. Also, there will be a Rzhev Global platform reuniting 160 participants from 59 regions of Russia and 24 countries of the world. Another example. Our Россотрудничество also every year invites young representatives of different countries for a short-term trips to our country. The events are being conducted in different regions of the Russian Federation, from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, and everyone can participate. Young leaders, for example, there is a large scope of age groups from 16 to 40 years. In the 15 years of the implementation of this program, there have been around 11,000 participants from more than 150 foreign states. There are also some events in cooperation with Rosmolodezh. They organized participation in the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the Eastern Economic Forum, and there have been different events with the Gorchakov Forum, for example, and many other sub-projects in the framework of this entire story. The movement of the first is another example. Some new programs involving children, for example, when it comes to studying diplomacy, international relations in our country and abroad. What is the slogan of this segment of the movement? Know how to be friends. How many foreign stakeholders can you find mentioning the word friendship? Perhaps this word has fallen out of use, it's become toxic for them. For example, this weekend there was Summer Children Ocean Festival in Vladivostok, started in last holiday, reuniting 1,503 school children from Russia and 13 foreign states. In Barnaul, from June 29th to July 3rd, there was a 6th summer school of young scientists, historians, Turkologists, and this forum reunited around 50 participants from Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan. This project is yearly being conducted by the Science and Educational Cluster of Turkology and Altaistics called Broader Altai. There are regular forums and workshops for young journalists, leaders, entrepreneurs in regards to different avenues in partnership with national structures of the CIS, BRICS, and SCO. There are science congresses taking place, workshops to preserve historical memory, theater schools, mutual exchanges, and there are a lot of such events. There are a lot of projects. It's difficult to enumerate everything. And perhaps I would also mention the official information portal in regards to this international youth cooperation. This link will be posted in the text version of the briefing, but it is as follows: entermol.su. It was created with the support of the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation. The task of this portal is to inform people abroad in regards to principal events and platforms in the area of international youth cooperation conducted by the Russian Federation. We invite everyone to join to those initiatives. I'm talking about our regions and some people from abroad. We value friendship. We value mutually respectful exchange of different ideas. We are capable of doing everything in our power, and that's the way that we are showing that we can do this in a mutually respectful manner. And let's take one online question. Is International Affairs with us right now? Yes, good afternoon. Last week, the Russian embassy in Belgium reported an increase in the issuance of traditional values visas to the subjects of the kingdom. Specifically, in 2025, there have been 17 such visas, and in 2026, there have already been 9 visas given out. Could you provide more details on the number of recipients of such visas worldwide, and specifics of obtaining them, and the circle of eligible individuals? And during the last briefing, we've addressed this topic in sufficient detail, and we'll be providing a corresponding link. We're talking about the executive order of the President of the Russian Federation, number 702, dated August 19, 2024, on providing humanitarian support to persons sharing traditional Russian spiritual and moral values, serving as one of the tools helping foreigners realize their desire to move their Russia. just out of curiosity or some familial ties. No, we're talking about doing this to why we need this document to optimize and improve measures of assistance and support for those settlers, those people that want to preserve something very important to them. However, they are subjected to persecution, making the realization of their aspirations impossible in current state. I would like to remind you that we create a special HQ for support of resettlement and adaptation for repatriates in the Russian Federation. Pursuant to Article 1 of the Executive Order, the main criterion for issuing visas to foreign citizens or stateless persons is the rejection of policies enforcing destructive neoliberal ideological premises implemented by the countries and citizens of citizenship. The list of foreign states implementing such policies currently includes 47 countries. People from 47 countries of the world can enroll in the opportunity to receive such visas. A key feature of the executive order is that it grants foreign nationals the right to apply for a temporary residence permit outside the standard country quota and without submitting documentation confirming proficiency in the Russian language, knowledge of Russian history, or the fundamentals of Russian legislation. The issuance of such visas is available in any Russian diplomatic mission abroad. Detailed information on the application procedure for this category of citizens is available on the official websites of our embassies and consulates and will be provided in text version of the briefing. Over almost 2 years since the executive order took effect, foreign citizens have demonstrated.
Вы захотите, я, насколько помню, вы захотели эти цифры узнать. Порядка 2000 было оформлено виз, то есть не подано заявок, а уже оформлено более 1800, 1843. Какие страны являются в этом?
Which countries are leaders of sorts in regards to the number of people requiring such visas to be resettled to Russia? Germany, France, Italy, the U.S., and Estonia. The thing that you mentioning the statistics cited by our embassy in Belgium, the statistics this year includes 7 months roughly. We'll watch this with great interest. Thank you. Is Rzhev Pravda with us, please? You know, today you've mentioned numerous times the phrasing new normal. There's been a horrible story ongoing that there have been some horrible events happening in our country, that where peaceful civilians are murdered, and information about this is being ignored by the Western community, and you were talking about this in every briefing, and what you see in the West, that killing, new normalcy, that killing Russians is all right. This current situation, what could be the future, for example, of ours in regards to the Europeans and United States? This question is linked with the previous one. The people are being persecuted for not wanting to rupture their links with the historical homeland, that they are not professing some false science or false teaching, that they are professing love for their mother tongue. Perhaps people that are not even that psyched about Russia, but want to still retain some sort of connection, they are still being persecuted. Despite all these narratives and the colossal funds that have been spent by the West to fool the populace, the understanding the situation is critical is this was so tragic for them that at some stage in 2020s and even before that we suddenly found out that we saw so many requests to be resettled in our country with this propaganda, anti-Russian propaganda, with direct calls to murder people speaking Russian or are Russian by ethnicity or citizens of Russia. And it's all those crimes are trying to be justified, especially in the strongest place, in the strongholds of these propaganda efforts. People got the desire to move to Russia. People without any roots or connection without country in regards to the historical or family character. There was nothing. They understood something. They understood it with more clarity. This is directly related. In 2024, this document was adopted. It's a very touchy subject, very sensitive topic. It was developed for some time. However, it was adopted and quite speedily. And you saw the stats. That's the only thing that we can see in less than 2 years. And this is not including the resettlement of our compatriots in the Soviet Union times. This only concerns the people that they're directly connected with the Western world. They understand that this is a dead end for them to be continuing living in their countries. And responding to your question, it would be wise to repeat the following idea. At the end of the 30s, the Western and Central Europe people lived not only in the conditions of this new normalcy, new ethics. Every day they went by ghettos in their own cities where the very same people, identical people, were living. People that until recently had same rights, same passports. They were well off. There was no threat coming out of them. However, after being ushered into those human warehouses, storage was presented as the norm, and people saw that. People went by. They saw that on the left, to the left of them, there used to be a shop, and to the right, at the next day, this person who never stole, who never did anything criminal, was deprived of what he had and was sent to a reservation of sort. And people were walking by concentration camps where every day hundreds of people were exterminated. Children were exterminated, civilian population were exterminated, which had no criminal intent, no criminal deeds. They were different nationally, ethnically, and perhaps not even that different ethnically. And people were still perceiving that, as you say, as new ethics, new normalcy. What does this signify? That those challenges are presented to humanity repeatedly. 20th century, 21st century, 19th century, these slave trades, whatever, they did understand, being enlightened, educated people. How educated were those people? Possessing much knowledge about history, culture in different countries, being
part of the global creeds and religions. They were aware that they slaughter and exploit people because of the difference in the skin color or being physically stronger, possessing firearms. They were aware of that, but it was the new normal. And the so-called notorious abridged Bibles that were edited and published in England in the 19th and 18th century. Bibles for slaves, so-called, to be disseminated on colonial soils with segments related to from the gospel related to the human freedom omitted, so that the slaves should not believe that everybody is equal. Just only the mention of slaves remained. Not the slaves of God, but the slaves of their white masters. This was the new normal of that period. In the Middle Ages, in the streets and in the squares, fires were burned and people were set ablaze because of making scientific discoveries or having different color of their hair or being beautiful women. This was the new normal of that period. And a lot transpired in other parts of the world, and the humanity has been going through such ordeals over and over again. And so we either learn the lesson or we do not. We ain't invented nothing new. We ain't answering and responding to new challenges. What I marvel at is that how, given the knowledge of history and being able to pass it down to the new generations with photos, videos, and audio, and books and texts, whatever, once again, we ain't been able, the entire planet, to counter to this new normal experiment. Whether we'll go through that, well, this country, I have no doubts. With respect to them, let it be their problem. A German journalist, being a national of Germany, the descendant of Bismarck's, he asked me, when are you going to save Germany from the new normal? He asked me. Save from the current perception that children are sexless and the family is not the supreme value anymore. And I told him, both grandfathers of mine, and I repeat it with dignity against the backdrop of this memorial in Rzhev, both grandfathers of mine saved Germany back then at a cost of unparalleled losses and casualties, and we have lost 27 million in casualties. Once we saved Germany from itself, we saved its neighbors from Germany, and we saved the people from Germany from the Nazi madness, and now you do on your own, I told him. So our cause is righteous. It's not because we are exceptional, as people in the West might be stating. I watched a TV program, an entertaining one, and they discussed that they have the beauty gene and the liberty gene, and then they started talking this too. Well, it's not because of that, but because we live by the commandments. We know the lessons of history. We venerate our heroes, and we curse anti-heroes to preserve the proper memories in history. And we prevent the anti-heroes be raised to new heights, to podiums. So our cause is righteous, and this is why we will win and prevail. And from this very perspective, there is no doubt in that. And what happens to that minority that for decades has been approaching the line, the border line, replacing values and trying to distort our self-perceptions. And let's leave all that to them. I apologize for taking so much of your time. Ria Novosti is with us. Good afternoon. The question is, on the 22nd of July, Moldovan Foreign Minister Popshoi stated that Moldovan diplomats are held for hours at the Russian border. The following day, Moldovan Ministry of Foreign Affairs published a warning to Moldovan citizens regarding the risks of traveling to Russia, where they are allegedly exposed to the risk of unfounded arrest. What is the actual situation? Well, this is the fact distortion, the practice of provocative border incidents targeting Russian diplomats, couriers, officials, and ordinary Russian citizens was initiated by Chisinau and Sandu regime after she rose to power with all those pro-Western anti-Russian forces in 2020-2021. Since then, there have been instances of expelling our diplomats, denying accreditation, border detentions, and imposing embassy staff quotas. Obstacles are created for Russian citizens entering Moldova and even for their return home. Moldovan authorities do not refrain, even in purely humanitarian circumstances, such as people, for example, traveling to attend their relatives' funerals. And naturally would not leave such lawlessness unanswered and respond in kind on the basis of reciprocity. We have repeatedly published travel warnings for our citizens regarding travel to the Republic of Moldova, not on political grounds. Allegedly, we don't want our citizens to go to Moldova. No, we just tell them what may come in for them. More than a year ago, in April 2025, a note from the Russian Foreign Ministry was sent to the Moldovan side proposing bilateral consultations on the entire set of issues related to cross-border movement between the two countries. Mr. Popshoi, as minister, should be aware of that. We believe that such matters are best resolved through civilized dialogue via diplomatic channels. Unfortunately, despite our reminders, the Moldovan side has failed to respond to that and continues its arbitrary actions on the border. Nevertheless, our offer remains open, but we actually try to summon their ambassadors or representatives in Russia. This is the actual situation. Okay, online. Chinese Media Corporation, are you with us? I cannot hear you. Yes, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you now. We will have two questions. Not long ago, an artificial intelligence conference was held in Shanghai, and the Chinese side emphasized the openness and mutual benefit. And apart from that, it was stated that China will provide 5,000 places for developing countries to participate in courses and seminars on AI, and there'll be AI Application International Cooperation Center based on BRICS and SCO mechanisms. What is your take on these measures to shorten and reduce the digital divide and strengthen global South potential, and what are the areas of cooperation on AI between Russia and China that bear the utmost promise? I can also state that the Shanghai platform has become one of the most relevant and authoritative forums, and this year we were represented by research centers and developers, and this reflects our resolve to cooperate and pursue scientific and technical exchanges, and we take positively all steps that would improve the access to new technology and knowledge on AI. We know that the AI is viewed by the collective Western minority as a tool to build neo-colonial structures, and we issued an article in the Rossiyskaya Gazeta last summer called Metropole and Colonies on Neocolonialism, and we know that without joint action will not be able to resolve the digital inequality as it has been around, and the UN General Assembly and its subcommittees have been talking that for decades, and now we're seeing the rise of the new AI technology, and the digital divide may become huge. Russia has been approaching this as a state with full cycle solutions, and we actually have our own LLMs and cloud platforms and applied services, and we have unique competences at the juncture of nuclear sector, high performing computing, and we come up with comprehensive project proposals to our partners on data centers, energy supply that is stable and reliable, human resources training, and unmanned systems and smart cities that we've been implementing, all that in dozens of cities around the world. And in Moscow, 60 services of AI help doctors detect signs of illnesses in 43 clinical areas. And actually, we are combining traditional classical medicine, and it is of significance that it's not about imposing a technological matrix, but of sharing expertise and storing data in conformity with a country's legislation if it shows interest internationally. Our country has been promoting non-discriminatory access to data, to computing capability, modern neural models and products related to them. We counter attempts to turn the AI into a closed-door club of the selected minority and an instrument and a weapon of technological colonialism, and this would limit the country's capability to come up with rules and standards of AI. We are convinced that international cooperation in this respect should be guided by the central coordinating role of the United Nations, guaranteeing sovereign equality, non-interference with their domestic affairs. But this platform launched dialogue on AI just recently in July in Geneva. A first meeting of that format was held, and despite huge interest manifested and shown by countries, so far it's limited to exchanges of opinions. So we welcome the Chinese initiative on the Global AI Cooperation Organization, and the fact that a relevant agreement was signed on the 16th of July in Shanghai to establish such an entity was a practical step to move towards this interaction mechanism, to step up the capabilities of developing countries. We hope that this future organization will equalize states in AI, and it will become an effective tool to overcome digital divide with specific projects and measurable efficient results. And if we talk about goals, well, we consider creating an international catalog of solutions on AI, mechanisms of joint pilot projects, joint approaches to security, testing and standards setting, competence centers, advanced training and upskilling. If we speak about bilateral cooperation with China, we believe among priorities are greater interaction between research centers and companies of both countries, providing bilateral joint mutual access to AI models and hardware and software systems and joint educational programs, teacher exchanges and internships and coordination multilaterally, including the United Nations, International SCO, BRICS, and ITU. And this new organization on AI will help develop AI for the sake of the global community, not only for the blooming garden or orchard. My second question. Japanese defense minister stated that the country needs an open discussion regarding nuclear weapons, and that was in the context of review of key national security documents planned by the country. Japan remains the only country to have suffered nuclear bombings and has traditionally advocated non-proliferation and rejection of nuclear weapons. How does the Russian side assess such statements? Does Russia believe Tokyo's shifting rhetoric on nuclear deterrence could affect regional security or strategic stability in the APR? Well, you know, you've quoted the Japanese foreign minister saying that Japan needs an open discussion on nuclear arms, and I just wonder whether they need such an over discussion to preserve the memory, historic memory about who and how used nuclear arms against the Japanese people back 80 years back. And actually, it is about being overt and outspoken in discussions on nuclear arms, and on the other hand, the actual hard facts are blotted out like pages from a course book on history in Japan, and that kinda is done by someone instead of Japan, or is it done by the Japanese leadership? They've been hushing up facts.
Just recently, during a press conference on the sidelines of the Russia-ASEAN ministerial meeting, Minister Lavrov provided a comprehensive comment on this topic. We are closely monitoring such statements by Japanese officials, treat them with maximum seriousness, and we do not tend to regard them as mere figures of speech. We understand who supports Tokyo, who leads this country. In reality, Japan, unlike many countries whose leadership considers acquiring or hosting nuclear weapons in its territory, is sort of a threshold state, there is such a term, so that they don't need much time from the moment the decision is made to the moment when its own nuclear warhead could be created. Moreover, there have been questions already directed at Tokyo regarding the politically inaccurate accounting of special nuclear material. These arguments cannot be justified by self-defense interests purely. No one threatens Japan's sovereignty or territorial integrity. We should remember who attacked Japan with nuclear weapons. It was the closest ally, the U.S. Sovereignty and territorial integrity of Japan is not threatened by anyone from other states. On the contrary, we observe a resurgence of the aggressive spirit of Japanese militarism. We remind Tokyo that Japan is tightly bound by its obligations under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or NPT. Any attempts to move towards creating such weapons or initiate discussions on this possibility will be viewed by us through the lens of compliance with said treaty. In regards to the potential deployment of foreign nuclear weapons on its territory, Tokyo must realize any such actions will inevitably trigger a harsh reaction from the several countries of the region, and consequently weaken and not strengthen Japan's security. The potential implementation of a nuclear component and its inclusion into Japan's rapidly accelerating remilitarization process will create fundamentally new challenges and threats towards our country's security in the Far East and to the overall regional stability. The consequences of such responsible steps will be highly negative for Japan itself, as has been the case in the past. In this regard, we once again call on Tokyo to recall the historical lessons of World War II. that they are trying their utmost to forget. I'm talking about the history of World War II, and we call on them to return to a peaceful development path. Thank you very much. Is Reuters with us right now? Yes, good afternoon. We have two questions related to the context between the Foreign Minister Lavrov and the State Secretary Marco Rubio last week. The first question concerns the following. Following talks with Minister Lavrov, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio stated that concluding a peace agreement on Ukraine would require new ideas and new proposals acceptable to both sides, because what was presented in Anchorage would be not acceptable to Ukraine. President Putin said that the Anchorage proposals are still relevant, calling them a compromise. Returning to Rubio's words and Mr. Lavrov's remarks, can Russia ready to propose and consider new ideas beyond those discussed in Anchorage? Would this constitute a tightening or softening of Russia's negotiating positions? Would this be more severe than in Anchorage or otherwise? Let's go idea by idea. The last part of your question in regards to softer or tighter stance, Russia's position in regards to the negotiation process with Ukraine, conditions and new proposals mentioned by Rubio. Let's start with remarks of Mr. Rubio. They were published on the Department of State website, referring to the failure of the Anchorage formula due to it being unacceptable to Kiev. It is framed in a way that nothing of the sort was discussed at the Russian-American summit in Anchorage in August 2025. I just wanted to remind everyone what was happening at the time, that the United States authored the compromise proposal discussed there. It was brought to us to Moscow in early August 2025. It was brought in this very capacity. The Russian side took some time to evaluate those propositions at the Anchorage summit. We clarified whether the terms were still relevant. The answer was that they were still relevant. Correspondingly, we agreed. The American side assured us Kiev would also accept it, as the Ukrainian leadership, as was said to us by the U.S., would do anything Washington told them to. That was how things stood at the time. And it would be my advice to you to check with the U.S. side, perhaps the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. Perhaps you could refer to State Department or the White House. This raises a natural question which wasn't mentioned by the State Department or nobody else. Who exactly failed the implementation of the Anchorage formula, which was genuinely representing an instrument capable of leading to peace? I think it would be wise and just for you, as a representative of a Western media outlet that maintains relations with the State Department, not segregated. There were different attitudes at the White House, but at least to respond to your queries, it would be wise for you to clarify this idea. This indeterminate state, something being no longer relevant or failed or not having taken place, perhaps there should be some clarity brought to the idea, since State Department has made an official statement in that regard. On our side, we confirm our readiness for diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian crisis, which we never rejected. I brought numerous examples even today. Based on mutual understandings, including those reached in Alaska, we are ready to have a possible new discussions, proposals, ideas that will be ready to evaluate. We've never rejected these ideas. But since you refer to this quote by Mr. Rubio, primarily discussing something not yet formulated, it would be more correct to clarify the fate of the preceding arrangement that have already been on the table. This would be correct course of action first, at least to try to elaborate new ones. You said that you had another question. Madam Zakharova, thank you for your response. No, I still have a second question. The MFA statement mentioned that during the conversation between Mr. Lavrov and Mr. Rubio, there were discussions about diplomatic track interaction, and I wanted to know whether the positions of U.S. and Russia could be more closely brought to closer alignment in the diplomatic track in regards to the work of diplomatic missions. In regards to those negotiations, there was a separate attention being made to the normalization of the functioning of diplomatic missions of Russia and U.S., and there was an agreement in regards to the continuation of diplomatic foreign ministries line, and the further conclusions are up to you. Thank you very much. Is Singhua with us right now? Yes, good afternoon. We have the following question. The Russian President Vladimir Putin on July 20th signed an executive order on the continuation extension of the visa-free regime for Chinese citizens until December 31st, 2027. China previously extended visa-free travel for Russians also through late 2027. What are Russia's expectations in regards to the extension of the visa regime regarding mutual travel, humanitarian exchanges, and strategic partnership? What new opportunities this step could open to further deepen China-Russia relations in the framework of our comprehensive strategic cooperation and partnership? Thank you. Thank you. In regards to the forecasts, your question concerns expectations. In regards to forecasts, we need to base the thinking upon exact numbers and facts. The tourist exchanges are a powerful driver of Russia-Chinese humanitarian ties. Bilateral tourist flows have grown significantly. The introduction of visa-free regimes gave significant results. Last year, the bilateral tourist flows grew 17% and amounted to 3.3 million people. And in the first quarter of this year, we saw a 50% increase in tourist flows compared to the same period in 2025. We see confident growth in relative and exact estimates of visa, and the introduction of visa-free regime, originally set to expire on September 14, 2027, has been extended through the end of 2027 and is an important impulse for further growth of tourist exchanges. And this work aligns with agreements formalized in joint statements signed by state leaders of Russia and People's Republic of China to strengthen our strategic cooperation and deepen our good neighborliness, friendship, and cooperation relations signed on May 20th in Beijing. I would also like to point out when we're talking about, I will use this word, a visa-free regime, we're talking about not only tourists, but also there's a simplified regime for simplified way to conduct business contacts, scientific contacts, youth contacts, sports contacts, and we are truly convinced this decision was greatly expected and was met with gratitude by many people. We can call this a landmark event in the context of the 25th anniversary of the Treaty of Good Neighborliness, Friendship and Cooperation between the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. 25th anniversary of this that we are celebrating this year, which has become a foundational point for development of bilateral links, including humanitarian cooperation for the long term. Thank you very much. Are any questions in the hall? Just don't stand up, please, because it's more convenient that way. Yes, of course. Thank you very much for this briefing. I would like to ask the following question. You already mentioned today about the search movement continuing in the city of Rzhev. It's 70 years later, a moment where our warriors are going to the front line. We still discover the remains of our grandfathers and great-grandfather, and there needs to be a more broader involvement of the youth in these programs of searches and discoveries to make them more familiar with the artifacts that we are getting from the ground. So Rzhev is a history book in itself, which is impossible to be rewritten, which cannot be said for the print products and what we see in internet, where we can be changed overnight. The land near Rzhev tells us how difficult the battles were there, and we see the artifact being raised. For example, different creams, items of clothing, and many canned goods. They are not even different from what we see today on the shelves. How do you think those educational projects, what is their importance for international politics, for international agenda, and how interesting they are for the youth? Those processes, as you say, are institutionalized. The researchers work also with archaeologists and scientists. It received a well-deserved estimation on the part of the state. And I will say that those who live in the land when there was occupation, when there were battles fought, not to allow the enemy to get further inland, the Tver region, Rzhev. I remember it all, the Leningrad highway up to the city of Khimki near Moscow. This is the land of my youth. My grandparents lived there. We had a country house there. We know this, that the land told us we were playing on this land. We went to the forest to get some mushrooms or berries, collect them. We helped our grandparents in the garden, and we always found, during our endeavors, we always found something. I don't know what do you call it, the ammo for machine guns. We saw helmets, we saw bayonets being in the ground. We just put it on the shelf in our country house near a village of Spernovka, in Leningrad highway, in Golovkova railway station. We didn't think that they were artifacts that we actually were excavating. This was life for us, and our grandparents told us what this or that pin signified, what is this sign or order or medal, and why a warrior whose helmet was struck by a bullet wouldn't be returning home, or what would happen if unfortunately it would come to the fact that you could, in a forest, chance yourself upon a mine, whom to call, where to go. So something that used to be just a part and parcel of the life of my generation of children, when we didn't just push sand into holes. We pushed sand into craters from artillery shells, from trenches, because a peaceful life was returning to those areas, and there was a need for land to cultivate vegetables, etc., to create gardens. And now we see the realization that this was a part of life that required state participation, institutionalization. It required additional museum storage to get it to the museum shelves. For all this to be evidence of our ancestors lived and survived. So that it wouldn't seem afterwards that all this was invented, and that black turned into white, or white turned into black, as you said it. And thank God that in the recent decades, I will not stop talking about that. And I think that there's a great personal role played by President Putin. We made it part of our national idea, national pride, our national work in all Russian format, with different actors joining this work. The land is completely covered in those artifacts of the Second World War, and where there were some volunteers coming, where the real lines were situated, and where evacuations were held, where the people were led to save them, and people continue to work in the military factories. For example, my grandmother worked in the city of Perm.
And thank goodness, for a couple of decades by now, we've seen that this work is pursued by the government. And it's not merely the responsibility of the government, it's the combination of the governmental efforts and the legislative efforts and the civil society engagement. In case there is a tilt, like towards the government only, this will not be a good thing, and the civil society should be engaged, and we should all be confident that no law is broken, and that this will they'll get the support, and the government in turn should understand that this memory cannot be preserved without the public, broader public engagement. Back in the 1980s, you know, we had the dominating position that you do not interfere. We're going to do as we proceed, as we plan. None of your business. And all of a sudden, we've tried to pursue this joint work, and it is so gratifying to watch that the law enforcement and executive authorities and legislative authorities have been working in sync, in lockstep with one another, doing their utmost to take advantage of those years until our veterans are still with us, and the victims of the concentration camps are with us, and that we should enshrine everything that need to have been enshrined, and we should legalize what should have been legalized, and we should call things their proper names. And it's not only about the great patriotic war or the Second World War, it's about the genocide of the Soviet people, and it is so gratifying to see that it's a bottom-up movement, and it is kind of a civil society resolve and drive coming from them. And our civil society is loyal to the interests of the country because they're patriots and they've been living in this country and they'll keep living there. And it has been also backed by the government. I apologize for being quite hectic in my response, but it's so great a topic, and thank goodness our veterans have lived to see their cause implemented, and it has become part of the curricula of schools and universities and private, corporate and business community. Saw it all represented, and this was inter alia the judgment of our judiciary, calling this genocide. We also have some online questions. Do we have News.ru on the line? Good day. I just apologize. Just forgive me. I cannot but say that now Vladimir Medinsky has been subject to European sanctions, and he's accused of what? He's accused of the participation with in the negotiations with Ukraine, which was organized at the behest of Ukraine and the West. Now he is on sanctions lists. Just correct, Mr. Medinsky might correct me, but if I'm wrong, but he was penalized for the historic work rather, that he pursued, and the fact that we are gathering here at the foot of a monument to a soldier is his merit and his achievement, and he participated personally in revering the memories of the huge victims and the casualties that we suffered, and definitely that couldn't have passed unnoticed. And in a very vile fashion, the Europeans did what they did, and I must make mention of that. When I see this memorial, I keep thinking that had it not been for the role of the history of individual in history, and we argued quite a lot whether it's about the role of individuals in history, whether it is prevalent or not. And now the memories about the victims have been returned to the entire country. And yes, please, your question. Thank you very much for mentioning that. Well, in News.ru has been covering what happened in Istanbul, and I saw the intensive work of our delegation, and the question, well, you started responding to it. How does Russia assess the 21st EU sanctions package agreed on the 23rd of July, which includes transaction bans for 32 additional banks and the measures against the shadow fleet and extension of the oil price cap? Well, I think it's not a political assessment, but rather something that is in chime with the Europeans' economy's performance and the paces of growth. And there's a proverb: don't do trouble to others, or it's going to be trouble for you. And they've been trying to multiply trouble for us, but they actually instead should be looking up, and they would have seen that they dig themselves very deep, and they, without an arm of providence, they cannot hardly get themselves out of that, and they've been finding faults with us and with China, and they are excavating a pit for themselves. The price cap and the Brussels is a slapstick comedy. The European Union has been trying to change the rules of the games, not thinking about the third countries, and Brussels has now started redesigning even sanctions against Russia, because they've frozen the price cap reconsideration. Otherwise, it automatically would go up. So definitely, and that is a testimony about the intellectual potential or its lack. The measures against Russia and other measures of the sanctions list will not result in change of Russian foreign policy. They directly will damage to the global energy security, which, against the backdrop of the tensions in the Middle East, is quite vulnerable. But actually, no one cares for this in Brussels. They dig harder and deeper. In attempts of the EU to expand the blacklists of ships belonging to the shadow fleet, lack legal grounding. Well, it's about the shadow fleet is something I take into the inverted commas. So they kind of take out of nowhere these accusations, and they rubber stamp sanctions. And we noted restrictive measures against Medinsky, aide to the president of the Russian Federation. And that stands to no criticism. It is like a slapstick comedy, like there are jokes about the Roman Empire and other historical periods, and that are mind-boggling. And this is something of the kind. If you impose sanctions on the grounds of participation in talks, then the conflict can only be titled historical farce, a slapstick comedy. Well, once again, the Europeans demonstrates the cynicism of the EU, so-called calls for peace, showing efforts to prolong. Instead, they show efforts to prolong conflict, and they're hypercritic, and they want to torpedo peace initiatives, applying deception in order to keep doing one and the same thing, aggravating things on their own continent, which is. And there's another egregious example. Actually, sanctioning Maxim Grigoriev, a key personality of Russian propaganda, being a threat to the stability of the Kiev regime. And he's been saying the truth about the number of victims and casualties and terrorist attacks against civil infrastructures, has been giving facts and data and issuing reports. What in this case they mean to be democracy, what is their understanding and perception of democracy is not clear. We always gave our support to civil society organizations, and actually this is the trade union's house in Odessa tragedy, which we covered and extended our sympathy to the victims, and Maxim Grigoriev received similar support, and we tried to popularize his reports, giving the United Nations member states opportunities to look at what he presented. The Western bureaucrats do not like this, but this will not stop us at the end of the day. And you know, another champion against among the actions of the European Union is penalizing Mikhail Degtyaryov. He was put, he's head of the Russian Olympic Committee, on that list. So they actually go beyond their regular expediency. So it's not about the Kiev regime, it's about Russophobia and a desire to erase our sports and our culture, without the full understanding that it cannot be done. However, they try hard. And well, the decision of the German authorities towards the athletes with disabilities is something that has been mentioned by us today. So it's self-exposing of the European Union once again, and the International Olympic Committee has adopted a declaration to strengthen the sports and improving its autonomy. And against this backdrop, Europeans put Russian athletes and related officials on the stop lists. With respect to our response against this 21st package of sanctions is something that we will state shortly. Newsfront. Yes, Madam Zakharova. How do you evaluate the demonstrative persistence of the US and EU regarding sanctions against Russia, their constant tightening or extension and continuation alongside simultaneous accusations that Russia doesn't want dialogue? For example, an updated draft of the bill on sanctions against Russia recently appeared in the US Senate. Are sanctions themselves not a Western instrument of escalation and an obstacle to building a mutually respectful dialogue with Russia? So sanctions are unlawful, and they destroy everything: contacts, prospects, relations, and all other things. This has been proved by real life, and several years ago political analysts mentioned that, and diplomats, but today we all know how sanctions destroy the lives of the laymen, even if they do not know anything about the geopolitics. With respect to the that American character and the late one and his cause, I'd like to stop on that. Well, indeed, after Lindsey Graham's death, the discussions about a draft bill, a draft law prepared by him on sanctions against Russia have intensified, and actually this probably means that this is a kind of place taken by someone, or a role played by some political figures. There must be a series of positions that are meant to be a rostrum for Russophobia, and they seek seek for the cost, and very often insane ones, believing that a defeat should be inflicted upon a nation. They cannot be named sound people if they approve of terrorist attacks. So it's not about a personal undertaking or initiative of an individual, but rather an arrangement. And previously the White House tried to temper down those proponents of the anti-Russian sanctions, and that was in vain. But Washington is amid a great deal of problems: the Iranian reckless undertaking, inflation rise, and the growing energy bills, and the hawks from the Republican Party are doing an ill service to President Trump. The inefficiency of sanctions pressure on Russia has been proven in practice. One would hope the current administration remembers that the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act passed during Mr. Trump's first term severely restricted the US president's ability to develop pragmatic approaches towards our country. And it's obvious that approving a new anti-Russian initiative is similarly designed to hobble the White House in executing its foreign policy and complicate efforts to stabilize bilaterals with Russia, particularly in the trade and economic spheres. This would be tantamount to shooting oneself in the foot, and will cause damage to the United States itself. Well, it will tell that some of the initiatives failed, but better discuss this now and better name those guilty of the after effects of the negative consequences in advance. Furthermore, attempting to undermine our energy cooperation with partners against the backdrop of the Strait of Hormuz crisis will inevitably cause further market destabilization, fragmentation of global trade, inflation, declining living standards, and worsening growth prospects in most countries around the globe, hitting the poorest import-dependent countries hardest regarding energy, fertilizer, and foodstuffs. And those Westerners should not then cry the poor mouth, saying that they pity those starving, those malnourished people. It is entirely the fault of them, those who take measures, unlawful, restrictive sanctions, subverting global stability and security in a number of strategic areas. Lenteru is Lenteru with us.
Yes, good afternoon. We have one question. Would you comment on the recently surfaced Nazi statements in Ukrainian media by the newly appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Mr. Drapati? We already commented upon them, saying that they're Nazi in character. We can say a lot of things about Nazism, neo-Nazism, fascism. Doesn't change the essence. As soon as people say that the entire peoples or races, ethnicities cannot live or exist, we are entering Nazi territory. This is this time-tested idea. It was confirmed by the Nuremberg process decisions. This was an international legal process confirming everything that is related to Nazism in different manifestations. It's called Nazism, and you can formulate it yourself. We're talking about Nazism in itself. It's a moral, illegal manifestation, and it's going contrary to the conclusions of the Nuremberg Tribunal. Should I repeat what I already said? Probably not, because you already know that all those monstrous remarks by Mr. Drapati, they are monstrous in themselves. They tell us how society, or not even the political leadership, but society in Ukraine has been infected by the ideas of neo-Nazism and Nazism, when officials can permit themselves direct quotes of from ideas who obviously forever deemed as criminal in the history of mankind. I'm talking about Nazis and fascists. Mr. Drapati reflected his Nazi identity not only in his words but also in his deeds in Donbass. Mr. Drapati, it was him who tried to crush civilians riding an IFV when those civilians protested against the national radicals banning the Russian language and canceling Victory Day celebrations in Mariupol. Fire was opened on civilians, resulted in deaths of dozens of people, and this Drapati, and there are no additional epithets required for him. He's already Drapati. He is already craven. His essence is of a craven person. He also participated in the blockade of Donbass and ordered shelling of DPR, LPR residential areas. That's the same playbook that the Nazi invaders played in the territory of the Soviet Union and the territory of the Ukrainian SSR. And in these actions, they were assisted by the Ukrainian insurgent army militants that they are glorifying right now, and the SS Division Galiciana members also assisted in those terrible actions, as well as the other wretches who accompanied them. The vast majorities of Ukrainians fought selflessly against Hitlerite invaders during the Second World War within the units of the Red Army and as part of partisan detachments. The current Kiev regime has proclaimed itself the heir, but not to the heroes who defended their homeland, but they declared themselves heirs to collaborators, traitors, who faithfully serve the enemy of the Ukrainian people. They are trying to recreate this practice of giving honors to criminals. They are reinstituting some solemn memorial initiatives. This is a monstrous idea in itself, but perhaps this is something that will convince even the worst types of skepticists that we are witnessing true resurgence of neo-Nazism, we're witnessing neo-Nazis. Once again, for everyone, this confirms the relevance of the goals and the tasks of the special military operation. If there are no further questions, this is the part when I say goodbye until we see each other again. And I wish you all well-being, greatest strength, and faith. Thank you very much. Thank you.